Auctioned by the Alpha Trainer. A Werewolf Shifter Romance Audiobook. Written by Rain Hart. Chapter 1. The Red Veil of Ira. The wind howled around the stone spires like a wolf in mourning. Threefold Spire stood in full ceremonial shadow, cloaked not in banners but in silence. The plaza below the auction dais was filled with rows upon rows of cloaked figures. Men with black crests at their shoulders, women with tight-laced bodices, none of them spoke. They had come to see her burn. Rowenna Solwynd stood barefoot at the center of the auction altar, her hands chained behind her back, wrists swollen and bruised. Her red hair clung to her face in wet strands, what was left of it, after the cleansing. "She is not bonded," came the High Herald's voice, amplified through the crescent of stone. "She bears a child without a mate. She is a corrupted vessel." The crowd shifted but did not gasp. This was not new, but it was rare to witness. And more rare still, to see one like her, one who did not cry. From the upper tier, behind a lattice carved with the runes of judgment, Rowenna Solwynd sat on a padded stool, legs swinging, too short to reach the floor. 6 years old. Wolf-blooded, like her mother. Too small to understand, but not too small to feel the eyes on her. The weight of watching. "Why am I here?" she had whispered when the guards escorted her to the tribunal chamber. One of them had answered, not unkindly, "The law demands you witness. It's for the child to remember." She didn't want to remember, but she would. At the center of the dais, Ira lifted her chin. Her split lip bled slowly, tracing the edge of her throat like red lace. "I am not corrupted," she said, her voice hoarse, but carried by wind. "I am not broken. I chose him. I loved him. And I chose this." Her words struck like stone against still water. Ripples of murmur spread, but no one dared speak louder than her. "She confesses," Syraxus said, stepping into view with his violet robes trailing over the stone. His voice was smooth as oil, hands gloved in white, as though purity could be conjured with fabric. "She admits the mating was not formalized, not recorded. A rogue bond. An illegal love." He turned toward the crowd. "And so she is no longer a vessel. She is property refused. A wolf without a master. A body without purpose. She is not property." Ira shouted. He didn't flinch. He raised one hand. 2 men stepped forward with a bucket of water dark as blood. One dumped it over Ira's head. It wasn't water, it was bone wash, a slurry of ash and oil and old wine, meant to strip the scent of a woman from her skin. She gasped as it hit her, but didn't scream. Her hair matted to her skull. The red shimmer was dulled instantly to rust. Rowenna reached forward, small fingers grasping the lattice, eyes wide. "Don't," she whispered. But the second man stepped behind Ira with shears. In 3 sharp hacks, her hair fell to the ground, the sound of each lock hitting stone like a blade into flesh. "She is no longer Rowenna Solwynd," Syraxus said. "She is nameless." Then he looked up, straight toward the tribunal box, straight at the child. "Let the daughter see the consequence of a mate unsanctioned. Let the bloodline remember." Rowenna tried to pull away from the lattice, but her legs wouldn't obey. Her vision blurred. Her throat burned with something too big for tears. Ira's eyes found hers. She smiled. It wasn't wide. It wasn't warm. But it was real. And then she said, quiet, but amplified by the wind that rose from nowhere, that curled up under her feet, wrapping her words in invisible breath. "Freedom is not love. It is not being sold." The fire was ritual. It bloomed beneath her feet in a perfect circle, blue at first, then white, then red. She never screamed. Even as the robes burned, even as the bone wash flared and the hair on her scalp blackened into smoke, she remained upright. The crowd said nothing. Some turned away. Others simply watched. Rowenna didn't scream either. But she vomited. Right there on the edge of the tribunal bench. The guards startled, reaching toward her, but she was already limp. Her head fell back against the polished stone wall. Her hands twitched once. Then she was still. In the moments after the fire died and Ira was gone, ash, scentless, nameless, a cold gust swept through the spire. The guards muttered that it was an omen. But Rowenna wasn't dead. She was dreaming. She stood barefoot in the very place her mother had burned. The altar was cold now. The dais polished, cleaned of all stain. And on it stood a boy. He couldn't have been more than 17. Tall, dark-haired, gold-eyed. His robes were not black like Syraxis's, but white with gold lining. His face was beautiful. Cruel in the way statues are cruel, perfect, and untouchable. He didn't speak. He stepped toward her, and she saw his hand outstretched. "You can't escape," he said. His voice was warm, not threatening, and yet it terrified her more than the fire had. She wanted to run, but her feet didn't move. He touched her cheek. She woke with a gasp, breath shallow, heart slamming in her ribs like a trapped bird. The tribunal bench was empty. The wind was gone. And somewhere far above her, bells rang. The fire was over. But the echo of her name, Ira, still burned behind her eyelids. Chapter 2: The Wolf Beneath the Boughs. Rowenna woke screaming. The forest swallowed the sound whole. The moss beneath her palms was cold and slick with dew, but her skin was soaked with a heat that came from elsewhere, inside, behind the bones. She sat up sharply, breath coming in harsh gasps, chest rising and falling like she'd just outrun the moon. Smoke. Her mother's burning face. And behind it, always those eyes. Golden. Merciless. Beautiful. His hand had been on her throat in the dream. Fingers splayed like a collar, breath warm at her nape. His voice was quiet, a whisper threaded with something ancient, older than fire. "Don't run anymore." She tore the dream from her head like a spiderweb. That voice wasn't real. He wasn't real. She was alone. No, not alone. A sound soft, too soft for human ears, broke the stillness. Rowenna's fingers found the dagger beneath her pack before her eyes opened. She was on her feet in silence, shoulders low, the forest's hush wrapping around her like a second skin. It came again. A cry. Young. Feminine. Pain. Close. She moved. Through underbrush slick with morning mist, around the knotted roots of elder pine, Rowenna followed the scent, copper and sweat, a thread of adolescent fear laced through the air like perfume. Her bare feet didn't break a single twig. She was the wind. Then she saw her. A girl, no older than 15, lay crumpled against the trunk of a broken elm, her leg twisted at an unnatural angle. Blonde hair stuck to her face with blood, her tunic torn where bark had ripped through skin. Rowenna didn't hesitate. She crouched beside her, one hand on the girl's shoulder. "Easy," she murmured. The girl startled, trying to pull away, but her scream ended in a dry sob. "Please, I'm not ready. I haven't even bled yet." "You're safe," Rowenna said, her voice hardening. "For now." The girl's eyes, wide and green, stared at her like she was both savior and demon. "They said I had to make it past Briarwatch before sundown, or they'd track me like a dog." "You don't understand. There's a collar with my name on it." "I understand," Rowenna said flatly. She reached for her satchel. "What's your name?" "Lisa." "Well, Lisa, keep talking or you'll pass out." The girl whimpered but obeyed. While she spoke, of wolves in dark armor, of a mother who sold her papers to buy a bottle, of how she'd jumped from the back of a transport cart and run barefoot for hours, Rowenna worked. She splinted the leg with 2 arrow shafts and wrapped it in moss and linen. She checked the girl's scent markers, faint, undeveloped, but already starting to carry a trace of heat. Too late. She was already listed. "They'll come for you," Rowenna said. "Tonight, if not sooner." Lisa's eyes filled with tears. Rowenna didn't offer comfort. Instead, she pulled the girl's hood low and dragged a layer of wet mud over her face. "We can't stay here. There's a patrol near Briarwatch. I'll draw them. You move north. Slow, but steady. Stay near the river. Don't make a fire." "But I can't." "You can." Rowenna pressed something into the girl's palm. A pendant, jagged and silver, with a wind rune carved along its spine. Lisa stared. What is this? A promise. If they take you, bite your tongue and scream my name. Your name? Rowenna Solwynd. The girl's mouth fell open. You're dead. Not yet, she said, and vanished into the trees. The wind moved with her. Ashwind Vale was dense and damp, but the terrain sang under her bare steps. Every stone was known to her. Every pine whispered. She let her senses widen, feeling the air shift, the scent of sweat on leather, steel on fur. They were close. 5 hunters. No, 6. Trained wolves, not ordinary scouts. She could smell their arrogance. Rowenna stopped near a drop of earth slick with wet shale and waited. Torgal was the first to appear, his heavy boots thudding like war drums. The wolf pelt across his shoulders was dyed with house colors, green for Briarwatch and a red streak to signify clean collars taken. She stood up. His eyes widened, not in surprise, but in recognition. Well, he drawled. The ghost bitch. They said you were a myth. Rowenna smiled, slow and sharp. They say a lot of things. They also said you'd never catch a windborn. He didn't smile back. I don't need to catch you. Just enough of you to hang on a hook. The others emerged around him. Blades drawn. She didn't wait. Rowenna's body moved with the same grace the forest gave its prey, quick, elegant, merciless. The first guard lunged. She slipped beneath his arm and drove her dagger into his thigh. As he screamed, she kicked off his body and dove into the nearest thicket. The trap sprang immediately. Torgal roared, "Fan out." But she was already gone. They chased her for over a mile, through ravines and bramble, across whetstone and over rotting bridges. One fell to a pit she dug days ago. Another she lured into the hive tree, where wasps the size of her thumb drove him howling into the river. She bled from her shoulder now, a nick from a thrown knife, and her lungs burned. But she kept running. She had one last turn to make. The cliff loomed ahead, an old rock face half swallowed by ivy, the edge masked by fog. She jumped. There was no cry, no scream. Only silence as she vanished into the gorge. She woke in a cradle of thorns. Every part of her screamed. Pain wrapped her like a second skin, and blood soaked her side. Her leg didn't move. She tasted copper. But she was alive. Above, through the twisted canopy, she could hear nothing. No pursuit. No voices. No footsteps. She lay there for what might have been hours. And then she spoke. Not to the trees. Not to the gods. To the name carved in the inside of her ribs. I will burn your tower to the ground, she whispered. I will rip the auction from its spine. I will make them remember the name Ira. She passed out. That night, the dream returned. She stood once more before the dais. But now the fire was cold, the altar shattered. The sky above was thick with storm. He stood in the center, golden-eyed, barefoot, not older than 20 this time. Zevian, though she didn't yet know his name. He walked to her with that same, unbearable calm. No weapon, no threat, only inevitability. You're still running, he said, and reached for her again. She slapped his hand away. I'd rather die. But even as she spoke, her body betrayed her, heart stammering, breath quickening, a flush of heat curling in her belly. You don't belong to them, he murmured. You belong to me. She tried to scream, and woke with her own fingers wrapped around her throat. Chapter 3, a collar of her own making. They called it Dreadhall for a reason. The name wasn't ceremonial, nor poetic. It was practical, honest. A place of cold stone and colder rules. Of collars, not crowns. Where the scent of sweat clung to the rafters, and the screams had long ago soaked into the mortar between the bricks. Rowenna Solwynd entered it under a new name and an older face. Rain, she had told the guards, her voice trembling just enough. I don't remember where I'm from. They said I had rogue blood. I just want to be safe. I'll do anything. Anything. The word had slid out like venom. She saw it land. They didn't question her further. She had smeared ash into her hair to dull its copper shine, torn the sleeves from a child's burial gown to make her look half-starved, and bitten the inside of her cheek raw until she bled every time she smiled. A girl who looked like prey. They bought it. Dreadhall didn't waste time. Within minutes of being processed, she was marched down a long corridor with other applicants, girls between 12 and 19, some dazed, some already drugged, all silent. Bare feet on cold stone. Iron bands around their wrists, not to restrain, but to remind. At the end of the corridor stood a woman. Scylla. She wore no armor. No jewelry. Only a sleeveless black tunic that revealed the whipcord lines of a body built from discipline and cruelty. Her eyes were pale, too pale for a wolf, more like frost. Or bone. You, she said, pointing at Rowenna. Kneel. Rowenna hesitated just enough to be noticed. Not enough to be punished. She dropped to her knees. Scylla approached like a shadow wearing skin. She circled her once, twice, then crouched in front of her. The other girls watched with blank faces, already broken or not yet awake. You say you volunteered. Rowenna lowered her eyes. Yes, trainer. You remember nothing of your origin. No, trainer. Yet you walk like someone who's worn a collar before. A pause. Rowenna blinked. Let her lip tremble. I've dreamed of one, she whispered. Scylla stared at her for a long moment. Then stood. We'll see if you're ready to wear it. The obedience tests began at dusk. Rowenna was led to the training hall, a cavernous room lined with mirrored walls, not for vanity but for posture. Every breath, every shift, every twitch of the fingers was monitored. Punished. Corrected. She was stripped of her ash-dusted tunic and given a thin, sleeveless shift the color of watered bone. It clung to her skin like mist. She could feel her ribs under it, her heartbeat thudding through the cloth. There were no names here. Only numbers. Hers was etched onto the iron bracelet she now wore, 0487. She memorized it like a curse. Scylla began the session with what they called basic posturing, a euphemism for kneeling, crawling, bowing, and offering the throat. Submission, made beautiful. Humility, rehearsed until it was indistinguishable from pleasure. 0487, Scylla called. Rowenna stepped forward. The kneel. She dropped instantly, knees together, back straight, hands resting palms up on her thighs. Too perfect, Scylla said, eyes narrowing. Rowenna blinked. Trainer. You've done this before. No, trainer. But her body knew. Her bones remembered. She'd practiced these movements in secret for months before infiltrating the process. If she didn't pass the training, she couldn't reach the center. Couldn't get close enough to burn the roots. Still, she'd overstepped. Scylla moved closer. Rowenna didn't flinch. But her skin burned. Then came the scent. A vial was uncorked and waved beneath her nose. It was subtle at first, barely noticeable, but within seconds, her body reacted. Made trigger essence. The formula was forbidden for common use, but Dreadhall wasn't bound by ethics. It was made from distilled alpha musk, layered with trace heat triggers designed to awaken the latent instincts of unmarked wolves. Rowenna's throat dried. Her pulse kicked. Her thighs pressed together without her consent. She dug her nails into her palms. Hold, Scylla said. Rowenna did. The scent thickened. Her skin flushed, sweat blooming along her spine. Her stomach twisted in something like shame, but deeper. Worse. A craving she had spent 10 years killing in herself, suddenly dragged to the surface. She closed her eyes. In the dark behind her lids, she saw him. Zevian. She didn't know the name, not yet. But the face. The mouth. The way his hand cupped her jaw in the dream, his lips brushing her throat. The scent of him, not the vial. Him. Mine, he had whispered. Her body responded as if it were prophecy. She bit the inside of her cheek again. Blood bloomed. She let it fill her mouth. Pain over pleasure. Pain over heat. Pain over surrender. When her eyes opened, Scylla was crouched in front of her again. "You're resisting," she said quietly. "I'm trying." "No," the trainer said, her voice low. "You're choosing." Rowenna swallowed. Scylla leaned in closer. "Most wolves don't last 30 seconds under mate trigger without trembling. You haven't moved." "I have," Rowenna said softly. Scylla looked down. Her legs, her hands, her fingers were shaking. Barely. But it was enough. The trainer straightened and stepped back. "Acceptable," she said. 0487, you're marked as high compliance. You'll enter core preparation tomorrow." Rowenna nodded, still on her knees. But in her mind, she was standing over this entire room, setting it on fire. That night, she slept on a stone mat beneath an open grate. The air was damp. Her body ached. Her stomach had been empty for 2 days. Still, she dreamed. This time, the fire wasn't in the past. It surrounded her, warm and pulsing like breath. She stood in the middle of it, naked, unburned. Her body glowed with sweat, with power, with something ancient blooming inside her like a wound made of heat. He was there again. The Alpha. Zevian, though she still didn't know the name. He walked toward her with nothing on but the wind, golden eyes glowing like embers, his jaw set like carved stone. Beautiful. Horrible. He touched her arm. She gasped. His lips brushed her collarbone. Then her throat. "You were made for a collar," he murmured. "But not theirs." His hand slid behind her neck. She shivered. "Mine." She opened her mouth to scream. He bit her. She woke up, gasping, covered in sweat. Her neck tingled. She reached up, slowly, afraid. Nothing there. But when she turned to the mirror embedded in the far wall of the dormitory, the faintest trace of teeth, red, shallow, spectral, marked her skin just above the artery. A dream. But too real. Too vivid. She pressed her hand to it. "Not yet. I belong to no one." But even as she whispered it, she wasn't sure she believed it anymore. Chapter 4. The Alpha with No Name. There was no color in Black Spire Citadel. Even the light filtering through its high, arching windows seemed to bleed gray, like the place had drained it from the sun itself. Stone gleamed with polished ash. Curtains fluttered like old breath. And silence lived here, not peace. Zevian Drelthorn liked the quiet. He made decisions better in silence. The voices of his counselors often annoyed him, but they knew better than to speak without purpose. His authority didn't come from rage or spectacle, only the blade of his intellect. And the weight of his name. Drelthorn. A name written into the spine of the auction system itself. The Drelthorn bloodline didn't train wolves. It designed the cages. Zevian sat in the center of his war room, surrounded by half-draped data scrolls and scent-laced parchment tags marked with dozens of unique sigils. This season's spectacle batches were being finalized. Of the 8,000 unclaimed females processed through the outer sectors, only 300 would be selected for observation class. Elder tier patrons will demand at least 15 high-yield dreamers, said one of the assistant adjudicators. Preferably with pre-heat signatures. We've already tagged 32 possible candidates. I only need one, Zevian interrupted. Silence. He didn't look up. His hand hovered over the selection slate, index finger circling a name without touching it. The name blurred. Faded. Dissolved. "Find me a dreamwalker." The assistant hesitated. "Sir, dreamwalkers don't often survive conditioning." "I didn't say I needed her conditioned," Zevian murmured. "Just present." The assistant bowed and scurried off. Left alone, Zevian exhaled through his nose. A small gesture. The only crack in his composure that day. The dreams had returned. It began 3 months ago, simple flashes, no context. A scent like distant ash and wind. A laugh he'd never heard in waking life, but would know in a crowd of thousands. Then, the woman herself. She wasn't clear. That was the part that disturbed him. She moved like smoke. Her face only half-formed. Red hair, yes, but the rest? blurred at the edges, like even his subconscious couldn't hold her together. And yet the response was visceral. Violent. He woke sweating. Every time. Even now, in the cold citadel air, his palms itched with memory. She had touched him. Not with hands, never skin. But her breath had ghosted over his neck, her lips nearly at his ear. "You belong to me," she had said. No. She didn't say it. He did. He closed his eyes. And saw her again. Kneeling. Not in submission. But like a wolf before the spring. The dream shattered when the doors opened. "Father," Zevian said without turning. Elder Zevian Drelthorn entered the chamber with the quiet fury of a man too powerful to require announcement. He wore a robe cut from obsidian-stained silk, the collar lined with white fur, one hand resting on a polished cane carved from hollowed horn. "You're late with your selections," the elder said. "I've made them." "You've made one." Zevian smiled faintly. "Then it's a good one." Zevian moved to stand beside him. "You're chasing ghosts again." Zevian said nothing. His father glanced at the scrolls, then to the scent charts. "Dreamwalkers don't bond. They fracture. You want a spectacle that cracks apart on stage. I want one that doesn't." Zevian narrowed his eyes. "This isn't about the product. This is about your damn dreams." "I don't dream." The older man's laugh was soft. Sharp. "Then explain the scent markers burning off your bedding last week." Zevian's jaw ticked. "You're not some feral pup to rut into pillows," Zevian went on. "You are Drelthorn. You don't chase instincts. You write laws." Zevian turned his head, just enough to meet his father's gaze. "And what if the law is wrong?" Zevian's face went still. Cold. Like ice over a blade. "Don't finish that thought," he said. "Drelthorn blood doesn't bleed for rogues. It doesn't falter over a wet dream. And it does not question the teeth that feed it." He dropped a thin card on the table. A list. At the top was a name. 0487, Rain. Zevian's hand hovered over it. Stopped. "I know every candidate in the system," Zevian said. "You will choose within this list. No others. Do you understand me?" Zevian didn't answer. By the time he looked up again, his father was gone. That night, he summoned his private dream auditor. She was a silent woman with ash-white hair and a scentless cloak. Her job was not to interpret, only to report. "I want the uncategorized entries," Zevian said. "Unfiltered. Raw link chains." The woman hesitated. "That's forbidden." "Not to me." She nodded and produced a cube of carved stone. From it, threads of light unraveled, dream fragments, scent strands, instinctive echoes. Zevian leaned over them like a hunter watching a snare. Most were familiar. Then one flickered. Unstable. Untagged. But powerful. The scent markers alone nearly punched through the air, smoke, wet soil, blood, wildness. He leaned in. The image clarified for a single, impossible second. Red hair. Eyes like knives. And a voice. "You don't get to chain me." The dream chain collapsed. Zevian stood so fast the dream thread scattered. "What was that?" he asked. The auditor paled. "Unregistered subject. Partial imprint. Dreamwalking female, unstable tether. Possibly rogue lineage. We labeled her." She glanced at her notes. "Windborne type. Temporary tag, the wolf in the wind." Zevian exhaled. It wasn't enough. "Has she been processed?" The auditor nodded. "Possibly. A Rain-class female entered the queue this week. Partial match. Assigned to trainer Scylla in Dread Hall." Zevian's mouth curved into something between a smirk and a snarl. "Send a notice to Scylla," he said. "If Rain survives the first-tier conditioning, she is to be transferred to me." "You want her reassigned?" "I want her collared." Alone again, he returned to his chambers. He lit no fire. Didn't remove his clothes. He sat at the edge of the bed, breathing. The scent of her still lingered in the back of his mind. A wild thing. A fire he hadn't set. His. Not yet. But soon. Chapter 5, The Trial of Obedience. They brought her to the Hall of Glass just before the bells tolled 7th hour. Rain, they called her now. Not Rowenna. Her old name lay buried beneath the scentless shift and iron-branded color she wore, temporary, ceremonial, a symbol of submission that scraped the back of her neck like a blade. She hadn't slept. She hadn't eaten. The pulse between her thighs beat with a warning she refused to name. She was led down a corridor lit by blue flame. No warmth in the light, only precision. A place designed to reflect obedience, not inspire it. The walls were mirrored obsidian, polished until even silence echoed. She walked barefoot. Each step a measured refusal to tremble. Ahead, 2 iron doors parted with a hiss. The pre-auction trial chamber. And him. Zevian Drelthorn. He stood in the center of the vast, circular floor, robed in midnight black, stitched with gold thread. No emblem marked his chest, he didn't need one. The air around him told you who he was. The bloodline carved into stone. The enforcer of laws older than her rage. He turned when she entered. Their eyes met. Everything else vanished. It was not attraction. It was not curiosity. It was collision. The kind of gravitational force that cracked tectonic plates, that ripped stars from orbit. Her chest tightened. Her knees buckled without moving. Every part of her screamed, "Don't kneel," but her muscles ached to fold. Zevian said nothing. He only watched. Trainer Scylla appeared at her side like a ghost from shadow, voice sharp. Candidate 0487, you are present for Phase 5, Alpha-Induced Dream Sensitivity. Rowenna didn't respond. Scylla's fingers snapped once and Rain dropped to a knee, not out of weakness, but to mask the snarl building in her throat. The trial, Scylla continued, is to measure your instinctive reaction to direct proximity and alpha pheromone saturation. You are to hold position, eyes down, hands flat to thighs, until dismissed. You are not to speak unless spoken to. You are not to move unless moved. Rain didn't nod. She merely lowered her gaze. It was safer than looking at him. But she could feel him. Closer now. Each footstep a pressure drop. The room tilted around his presence, as if the stones themselves were adjusting to make space for his power. His scent reached her before his shadow did. Not artificial. Not distilled. Real. Powerful. Male. Alpha. It struck her like a summer storm, lightning behind her eyes, heat blooming at the base of her spine. Her thighs clenched. Her breath caught. She dug her nails into her palms so hard she felt skin break. He stood before her now, close enough to touch. He didn't. But the air did. The heat from his body curled around her like invisible claws, caressing places she didn't want touched. Her body shivered, not from fear. From memory. He was the dream. The phantom in the flame. The mouth at her throat. The whisper that still echoed in her bones. You belong to me. Her breath stuttered. He bent. One hand reached out, not to grip her, but to hover. A hair breadth from her skin. Rain's shoulders locked. His fingertips passed near her temple. Her neck burned. He tilted his head slightly, and for the first time, spoke. You're not like the others. The words weren't for the room. They weren't for the auditors. They were for her alone. She didn't speak. His hand moved lower, still not touching, tracing the air over her collarbone, then stopped just above her chest. Her heartbeat betrayed her. She hated the way it thundered. Hated that he would hear it. Feel it. Taste it. You're fighting, he said softly. Still, she stayed silent. Zevian's head dipped lower, his mouth almost at her ear. His breath slid down her throat like a drug. I wonder, he whispered, how long before you stop pretending? She snapped her gaze up. Their eyes met again. It was a mistake. He saw her. All of her. The fire. The fury. The perfect, exquisite defiance. And beneath it, the pull. The truth she would rather die than speak. He smiled. Not kindly. With knowledge. You'll kneel, he said, not because I order you to, but because your body will beg you to. The tremor that raced through her then wasn't fear. It was hatred. And hunger. She spat blood onto the floor. Scylla gasped. One of the dream auditors moved as if to intervene, but Zevian raised a hand. No, he said. She passed. But the metrics. She passed, he repeated. He turned, walking away without another word. The air cooled. The spell broke. Rain collapsed, not to her knees, but to the floor itself, her arms shaking. They carried her out unconscious. When she came to, the medics were already leaning over her. She's fevered, one whispered. Neck reaction. They pulled her collar aside. Just below her pulse point, a faint red impression curved along her skin. Not teeth. Not real. But dream bite. A phantom mark. A half-claim. No one had touched her. And yet the bond had begun. In the tower's upper chambers, Zevian stood at a high window, watching storm clouds gather over the veil. He could still feel her in his bones. Scentless now. But not forgotten. He had seen wolves kneel before. He had seen them break. But this one? This one would kneel only once. And when she did, the world would burn. Chapter 6: The Submission Pit. There was no light in the pit. No torches, no braziers. Only the cold glint of whetstone and the flickering reflections of the dream fire vents embedded in the floor. The air was damp, metallic, laced with the scent of blood, sweat, and the faint undercurrent of estrus. They called it obedience, but it felt like death. Rowenna, Rain, stood at the edge of the descent with 20 other females. Some trembling, some vacant-eyed, all stripped of outer tunics, marked only by numbered tags affixed to their colors. She was 0487. They didn't use names down here. Names gave shape. Shape gave power. Power broke the system. Scylla stood on the upper platform, arms crossed. Her voice was quiet, but it carried like thunder. You're here because you've shown promise. High sensitivity. Excellent dream resonance. The patrons demand beauty, yes, but also pliability. No one spoke. Scylla gestured toward the pit below. A slow ramp spiraled downward into the heart of the chamber, where a raised dais stood surrounded by mirrored panels. It resembled a stage. Or an altar. Today, Scylla continued, you will begin your display training. You will learn posture. Pacing. How to kneel like you crave the floor beneath you. How to speak like submission tastes sweeter than honey. One of the girls choked back a sob. Rowenna didn't blink. They were led down in silence. Mara waited at the bottom. She was lean and cruelly graceful, her arms painted in scent sigils, old alpha markings faded by time, but never truly gone. Her voice was honey, her smile poison. Spread out, she said, tone lilting. Let me see the curve of your backs. The ache of your knees. Open hands. Throats exposed. The girls obeyed. Rain did too. But every motion she made felt like coiling a spring. Her spine arched, not in reverence, but in refusal. Her palms opened with fingers spread, not soft, but ready. Her head tilted, but only because she was counting the distance to Mara's ribs. The instructor moved among them, correcting with a touch here, a sharp whisper there. The air grew hotter, thicker. A haze began to settle over the room. Then it hit. Scent saturation. The ducts in the floor hissed softly as the mate trigger compound released, slower than in previous trials, more subtle. Designed not to shock the system, but to infiltrate it. Sink into muscle and marrow. To convince the body it had always been ready. Always been waiting. Rowenna's lungs burned. She tried to control her breath. To center herself. But her legs betrayed her first. A tremble. A twitch in her thigh. Then heat, rolling up her spine like fire through dry grass. Mara stood before her now. Smiling. 0487, she purred. Show me your most obedient kneel. Rowenna didn't move. Mara's smile widened. You're burning. I can smell it. The room swam. The scent was overwhelming, pure alpha dominance wrapped in honey and ash. Her pulse roared in her ears. Her skin became too tight. Her mouth watered for something that wasn't food. No. No. Not him. Not again. Not now. Zevian's phantom pressed behind her eyes like a fevered memory. The feel of his breath. His words. You belong to me. She screamed inside. Her knees buckled. But she didn't fall. She sank. Slowly. Controlled. Each motion choreographed not for beauty, but for survival. Her body obeyed the scent, but her mind? Her mind stood above them all, teeth bared. Mara leaned in, lips at her ear. You're almost ready. Rowenna turned her head. Just enough. Watch closely, she whispered, and you'll see how a wolf dies on her feet. Mara's smile flickered. Then it happened. Rowenna's control cracked, not mentally, but physically. Her wind sense, too tightly bound, too violently suppressed, lashed out. A pulse of invisible force shook the mirrored panels. The girls cried out. One collapsed. Rowenna fell to all fours, body racked by pain. Her stomach twisted. She coughed, and blood sprayed onto the stone. Scylla appeared from above in a blur. She's rejecting the compound. Mara crouched beside her, expression unreadable. No. She's burning too hot. Rowenna tried to push up. Her hands slid in the blood. She laughed. It was soft. Broken. But real. You want obedience? She rasped. Then start by burying me. Scylla's jaw tightened. She's unstable. Mara nodded. Unusable. She'll contaminate the others. Not yet, came another voice. Syraxis. His robes whispered as he stepped into the pit like a shadow-given voice. His eyes gleamed with something between fascination and calculation. She's not a candidate for auction, he said, almost fondly. But she may still be cleansed. Scylla stiffened. The purification zone? She's fractured. But not shattered. It can be done. Rowenna looked up at him through blood-slick lashes. I've heard your fire, she said hoarsely. It doesn't cleanse. It devours. He smiled. And yet, here you are, already burning. They dragged her from the pit. Locked her in a narrow cell lined with obsidian tiles and scentless moss. No light. No warmth. Just her breath. Her pain. Her blood cooling between her thighs. She pressed her fingers to her neck. No mark. But the ache was there. A phantom bite. A promise. Or a curse. She closed her eyes and whispered. If I survive this, I'll burn your name into the walls of every tower. And in the dark, something whispered back. Not from the stone, but from inside her chest. Chapter 7, Syraxis Watches. Syraxis stood in the Hall of Judgment with a scroll of flesh-threaded parchment unrolling slowly in his gloved hands. Each line pulsed with inked scent data, behavioral metrics, dream resonance maps, and subdermal pheromone responses. The subject, 0487. Tag name, Rain. Unofficial classification, Windborn. And beneath it, in a faint, flickering script, barely approved for inclusion, a remark written in red, partial mate trigger rejection. No induced heat. Dream tremor wave detected. Possible dream awake response. He stared at that line for a long moment. Around him, the hall hummed with its eternal silence. The high walls flickered with dream light, visions of past trials, purifications, executions, all layered like oil over water. He knew what she was. Not fully, not yet. But enough. A she-wolf whose instincts didn't buckle under the system's design wasn't simply an inconvenience. She was a threat to the entire root structure. The entire economy of obedience. The choreography of lust and leash. He let the scroll curl closed, then turned toward the figure lying unconscious on the stone dais. 0487. The girl who hadn't knelt. Not really. Whose scent refused to open no matter how many times they laced the air. Who trembled on the edge of heat, but never fell into it. Who burned, but inwardly, without bloom, without surrender. Her lips were slightly parted in sleep, her brow creased. Even in unconsciousness, she looked like she was enduring something sharp. He stepped closer. You were made wrong, he murmured. No opening. No flooding. No soft scent to lure the teeth. You don't melt, you snap. He crouched beside her. She wolves like you don't bring gold. They bring fire. And fire doesn't belong to the stage. It belongs to the pit. A hiss of footsteps behind him made him rise. Zevian Drelthorn entered the hall without deference, robes cut in the fashion of higher executioners, but modified to allow freedom of movement. No guards. No fanfare. Just presence. You summoned her here, Zevian said. Syraxis didn't turn. I summoned a report. She's mine. Syraxis looked over his shoulder. She failed the pit. She survived it. She fractured a dream grid, rejected 3 layers of scent pressure, and bled from the mouth to kill a bond impulse. She's still standing. Syraxis stepped away from the dais and faced the younger male fully. You are not here to rescue a pet. Zevian's jaw clenched. I'm here because I was promised discretion in my selection group. 0487 is tagged under my mark. And if you can't tame her? Syraxis asked quietly. What then? I will. No, Syraxis walked toward him, voice silk-wrapped steel. You don't understand. Dream-awake types don't bend. They snap. They don't shift toward control, they calcify. They become obsessions. Wars have been waged over wolves like her. Systems have cracked. Zevian didn't flinch. Then crack it. Syraxis's eyes narrowed. You sound like your mother. That hit harder than any slap. Zevian's nostrils flared, but he didn't respond. Syraxis continued, stepping back toward the dais where Rowenna lay. She can't be allowed into the auction tier unless she's washed. You know the protocol. You mean broken. I mean purified. Syraxis leaned over her, studying her slack face. She's not fire yet. She's smoke. But even smoke suffocates. He straightened. If you cannot train her, fully, truly, then she must be removed. Zevian's voice was low. I didn't request permission. Syraxis met his eyes. No, he said, but you'll beg for it soon enough. Then he walked away. Zevian stood alone over her body. The girl. No, not a girl. A force. A howl. A rupture in a world that had always bent for him. And still, as she lay unconscious, she made the room feel off balance. He watched the small twitch of her fingers, the slight tremor of her eyelids. Dreaming. He reached out, not touching her skin, but hovering just over her heart. Don't make me choose between you and the system, he said softly. Because I will choose you. In her dream, the forest burned. The sky above was ash and her lungs pulled in air full of embers. She was running. Not away. Not toward. Just running. And he was behind her. Zevian, barefoot, shirtless, the golden thread of his eyes the only light in the night. She didn't stop until he caught her. His arms wrapped around her from behind, not forceful, not violent. But solid. Warm. She fought. Her elbow struck his ribs. Her heel slammed into his shin. He didn't let go. I'm not your mate, she said. I know, he said. You're mine. He kissed the back of her neck. Her body betrayed her. The shiver was violent. The want unspeakable. She hated him. She hated the feeling more. You don't get to save me, she said. I won't let them take you. Then you'll have to fight them. His voice at her throat. I already am. She woke up cold. The stone beneath her back was damp. Her limbs ached. Her neck stung. She reached up. No bite. But there was something, a warmth, a trace, a phantom mark that pulsed faintly against her skin like a memory too strong to forget. She sat up. Darkness greeted her. A cell. Not the pit. Smaller. Colder. The walls too smooth, too silent. The air carried nothing. No scent. No breeze. Dream cleansing. They'd put her in the purification sector. A voice crackled through the wall. Feminine. Distant. Measured. Subject 0487. You are to begin phase 1 of shame correction at next moonrise. Prepare for mind exposure. Rowenna closed her eyes. She could still feel his kiss in her dream. The phantom pressure. The heat. She hated that she wasn't sure whether it had comforted her or broken something she'd spent 10 years building. Chapter 8: The Shame Ritual. They didn't bring her in chains. They didn't have to. Rowenna walked of her own accord into the ritual chamber, barefoot, bruised, and silent. Her hands were untied, her neck bare. Her hair, damp with cold sweat, stuck to her temples in limp red strands. The guards watched her warily anyway. Everyone had heard what had happened in the pit. Everyone knew the Windborn was cracked but not broken. She hadn't bled when she was supposed to, hadn't begged when others sobbed. But now? Now, they said she would. Now came the ritual. The chamber was circular, the stone floor polished with oil and runed in spirals. The scent of crushed herbs, incense, and burnt cloth choked the air. High above, no ceiling, just the dome of stars projected through mirrored glass, turning slow and deliberate overhead. In the center, the dream altar pulsed. Flesh woven. Living. Threaded with scent roots and soaked memory spires. Atvra stood beside it. She was robed in silver netting that clung like a second skin, her eyes masked behind dream-lace silk. Her voice when she spoke was neither gentle nor cruel, only practiced. 0487, you will lie down. Rowenna hesitated only a heartbeat, then obeyed. Not out of submission, out of calculation. Every part of her, from the wind wound in her chest to the blood dryness in her throat, screamed against it. But she laid herself on the altar, arms at her sides, eyes open, staring into the dome above. Atvra stepped forward with the ritual bomb. It glowed faintly. A scent she didn't recognize, but her body did. Her stomach twisted. Phase 1, Atvra intoned, receptional memory insertion, auction sequence. The balm was painted onto her skin, across her collarbones, her thighs, the softest part of her stomach. Fire bloomed beneath it. Not literal. Worse. Memory. Fabricated, but too close to real. The dream pulled her under. She stood on the auction platform, exposed before a crowd of faceless silhouettes. Her body was slick with dream oil. Her collar glowed. She was swaying, not with seduction, but with helplessness. Hands reached for her. She was passed from one figure to another. Each had no face, only scent. One laced with ash. One with spice. One with leather and metal and filth. They tugged, lifted, marked. Teeth scraped her skin, never fully biting, always hovering. And her body, her traitorous body, responded. Heat spiraled up her spine, pulsing between her legs. Her mouth opened. She moaned. No. No. It isn't real. Phase 2 began without pause. They called it conditioned ownership. The shadows began to speak. Good girl. She likes it. She was born for it. Rowenna screamed in the dream. Not out loud, but into her own chest, where her wind lived. She buried the scream there, folded it like a knife, and listened. There, just beneath the dream voices, just beneath the slick wet tongue of false affection, she heard it. The order. The sequence. The dream structure wasn't random. It was mathematical. Chanted in breath patterns. Recited in tempo. 3 beats, memory. 2 beats, scent. 1 beat, mark. It repeated. They were using the same dream frequency across every female they processed. She understood it not as victim, but as thief. She was stealing the rhythm. Phase 3, submission bond induction. She felt the bite before it landed. Dream teeth. Not real. But her neck exploded in fire. Her breath shattered. She twisted. And arms wrapped around her. Not shadows. Not faceless. Him. Zevian. His mouth found her nape. His voice not command, but promise. I won't let them take you. Her mind buckled. Her body wanted. Her heart howled. No, she screamed and shoved him, not in hate, but in terror. He stumbled back, shock in his eyes. She glared at him, tears streaking her cheeks. If you touch me here, she spat, then let me die. He froze. Her body writhed with false heat. Her vision blurred with shame. But she remembered. 3, 2, 1. She shifted her breath, bit her tongue, used her wind to echo the chant backward, and whispered, "Cut. Chain. Burn." The altar trembled. The dream shattered. The memory sequence reversed, folding inward, turning on itself. Atvera gasped in the waking world, blood trickling from her nose. Rowenna's body arched, blood gushing from her mouth, her ears, her thighs, the marks of fabricated arousal now become wounds. And then, silence. She lay limp, her skin raw, her breath shallow, her eyes open. Atvera stumbled back, hands shaking. She broke the sequence, she said to no one. Another priest ran forward. She didn't reject it, she rewrote it. No, Atvera whispered, worse. They turned to the dream altar. The spires had cracked. Smoke leaked from the ritual bomb jars. One of the memory runes burned in reverse, unraveling its chant. "She's not resisting the dream," Atvera said, her voice hoarse. "She's eating it." They looked at Rowenna. Still, barely breathing. But her lips moved. A whisper. A command. A curse. And in her mind, behind the blood, behind the fire, she smiled. Because now she knew how it worked. And soon, she would make it bleed. Chapter 9. She Who Devours the Dream. The dream didn't end when she woke. Rowenna staggered through the ash fields of the borderlands with blood dried down her thighs and a fever that no fire could match. Her body was torn inside and out, but her mind? Her mind burned cleaner than it ever had before. They had cast her out, thinking her broken. They hadn't realized she was awake. She stumbled through the ruins of the old dream pits, places once used to extract forbidden desires and reshape them into illusions. The place smelled like rot and forgotten rituals. Black stoned halls etched with symbols no longer used, soaked with memory and silence. And she wasn't alone. "Stop," a voice rasped from the shadows. Feminine. Sharp. Carved from wind and bone. Rowenna did not stop. The figure emerged slowly, as if the darkness itself peeled back to let her through. A woman draped in tattered silver veils, hair pale as salt, eyes rimmed with the blue glow of sleeplessness. "You are Rain," she said. Rowenna's lip curled. "That name is dead." The woman tilted her head. "Then who woke up in its skin?" "Rowenna," she whispered. "Solwynd." The woman's smile returned. "Then you're the one I came for." Her name was Ilsen. A dream witch. A heretic. Exiled from the inner courts for practicing blood memory weaving, outlawed methods that let a mind not only dream, but rewrite what others believed was true. Rowenna didn't trust her. But trust was for wolves with time. Ilsen led her deeper into the ruin, toward the edge of a collapsed dream pool, where reflections shimmered on broken marble as if the dream still slept beneath. Symbols pulsed on the walls, slow and rhythmic, like the last heartbeat of something ancient. "They put you on the altar," Ilsen said. "And you devoured it." "I didn't mean to." "No," she agreed, "but your blood did. You didn't reject their dream. You chewed it up and bled it back out. That makes you a conduit. Maybe the last one." Rowenna leaned against the wall, eyes closing for just a moment. "Then what?" "Then you flood them." Ilsen stepped close. Her hand, clawed and trembling with old power, reached for Rowenna's chest and pressed against it gently. "You've eaten their rhythms, their chains, their order. Now you write your own. On the day they put you in the center of their spectacle, you feed them a song they can't survive. And for that," Rowenna asked, dry-mouthed, "you need to offer a full chord. Pain, scent, memory fused. A deep dream tether. The kind only possible after a full mate response." Rowenna's mouth went dry. She knew what that meant. She had skirted heat, survived scent, fought the hallucinations. Even in the pit, even under Zevian's gaze, she had only barely held the line between arousal and surrender. To activate the chain, she would have to fall into it. Willingly. "Then let it hurt," she said. Ilsen blinked. "What?" Rowenna lifted her chin. If they demand my body, I'll burn it from the inside. If they want heat, I'll give them flame. Every part of me they try to brand, I'll make them feel it on their own skin. Ilsen stared. Rowenna grinned, teeth blood pink. Give me the ritual. It began at dusk. The broken dream pool pulsed like an open wound. Ilsen laid symbols in salt and crushed bone. Rowenna sat at the center of a triangle made of ash, her body slick with blood and scent balm that shimmered faintly with suppressed pheromones. Every scar on her skin was a memory. Every tremor in her muscle was a refusal. Ilsen's voice was low, controlled. You'll go deep. Not to relive, but to reinfect. You'll open the tether they tried to close, and you'll pour yourself into it. Rowenna nodded once, then shut her eyes. The descent was faster this time, because now she knew the way. Dream wrapped around her like silk soaked in oil. It slid under her skin, found her shame, her fear, her heat. The phantom teeth returned. The auction voices. The groping hands. The forced kneels. She let them come. And when they reached her, when the scent-laced hallucinations forced her onto her knees, slick with sweat, aching and breathless, she didn't fight it. She embraced it. Let it crawl through her. Burned it into fuel. The pleasure came uninvited. Hot. Blinding. Shaking. But instead of crying out, she screamed back into the system. You want to mark me? Take it. Feel what it costs. Every pulse of pain, she flooded into the ritual dreamscape. Every arch of forced want, she twisted into a spike of unbound instinct. She wasn't surrendering. She was transmitting. And she knew it was working because miles away, in Black Spire Citadel, Zevian sat bolt upright in his chamber, his skin flushed, his heart hammering like it had been pulled into a storm. She's awake. The system's alert tone flashed through the command tower. Dreamwatchers scrambled as ScentNets spiked into chaos. A dozen unmated alphas reported dream disturbance. One snapped a collar chain during routine testing. One fell into heat frenzy and had to be sedated. Zevian stood in the ward chamber, staring at the flickering sigil on the report scroll. Subject 0487, Windborn. Status: instability imminent. Dream chain overload detected. Sir, a scout said, voice shaking. If this continues. She's not resisting, Zevian murmured. The others paused. She's singing. He turned away before they could see the flush rising on his throat. He closed his eyes. And there she was. In the dream again. But not running. Standing. Tall. Glorious. Drenched in blood and dreamlight. Her eyes locked to his, and her voice, in that place that had once been shame and submission, curled like smoke around his spine. You were never here to tame me, Zevian. She walked toward him. He couldn't move. She leaned close. You were here to learn how to kneel. She woke up with a scream trapped in her throat. The ritual was over. Ilsen was kneeling beside her, shaking, eyes wide. You lit the pool on fire. Rowenna coughed blood. Laughed. Then let's keep stoking it. Outside the ruins, the guards arrived. She was not dead. She was not free. But she would be paraded in the center of the grand auction, branded the most unstable. They thought it would shame her. But as they dragged her back toward the tower, Rowenna whispered beneath her breath, "Let them feel me." And in the wind, a dozen dream chains began to twitch. Chapter 10, to be watched while she burns. The moon was full over threefold spire, silver light pouring down the obsidian arches like spilled mercury. From every balcony, every tier of the spiraling tower, alphas leaned forward in silent hunger. The ritual bells had long stopped. The crowd no longer rustled. The auction had gone quiet. Because tonight, the centerpiece was not for sale. She was for spectacle. The Windborn. Rowenna stood beneath the arch of the dream rotunda, her body barely concealed beneath translucent silk dyed the color of cooled ash. Her skin shimmered with the oils of preparation, her wrists adorned with gold cuffs that bit into bone. They'd painted her lips red. Not for beauty, but to make it easier to watch them tremble. From above, the dream judges watched through veils of scent glass. Syraxis sat tallest among them, a shadow wrapped in ceremonial bone thread robes, face expressionless. "She will kneel," he said softly, "or she will bleed." Behind him, Zevian stood with arms folded, his jaw locked, eyes unreadable. Below, the circle glowed. The dream round, where generations of marked she-wolves had performed their submission sequence. A dance so old no one remembered its origin, only its effect. It was not for art. It was to show the crowd what obedience looked like, what the body of a she-wolf became when it stopped resisting. And now Rowenna would do it. They had dressed her in her mother's sequin silks, made her wear the same gold chain between her ankles, forced her into the same barefoot spiral. She stepped onto the circle, and the audience leaned forward. The music began, no melody, just a rhythmic pulse, like a heartbeat slowed by sedation. Rowenna lifted her arms. They shook, not from fear, from rage she could no longer swallow. She turned once, slow, graceful. Her hips dipped low, the silk fluttering. Every movement drilled into her bones by forced hours in the submission pit came to life. It was perfect, obedient, graceful, and entirely a lie. Because with every step, every shift of her bare feet against the stone, she whispered. Not words, not sounds. Wind. Soft, nearly silent currents of wind that wove into the music. Invisible fingers tracing the edges of the dream scent soaked into the air. And the audience? They began to stir. A twitch in a noble alpha's jaw. A low growl from the seat of a regional lord. Sweat, suddenly, at the brow of a high fong. Because what they were smelling wasn't just heat. It was shame. It was violation. Blood and scent and fear and arousal, wrapped into a perfume only wolves who'd ever taken what wasn't freely given could recognize. Guilt, rewritten as desire. Rowenna twirled again, lips parting. They wanted her to bow at the end. Fall to her knees. Touch her forehead to the floor. It was the moment her mother had refused. The last act of the last dance. The final gesture before the collar was locked. And now Rowenna stood at the center of the Dreamfire circle, the scent of her own rage thick enough to choke on. Her body shook with restraint. But her heart howled. I am dancing your dance. But I am lighting fires in every one of your lungs. A sound rose from the crowd. Not applause. Confusion. Discomfort. Tension. Alphas shifted in their seats. Some touched their chests. One whimpered. Their instincts, so carefully trained to respond to submission, misfired. Because the scent they were inhaling now was tainted. Still laced with heat, but buried in it. Pain. Control. Arousal. And revenge. Above, Syraxis watched it unfold. His nostrils flared. He turned to Zevian. Your she-wolf is tampering. She's within rhythm, Zevian said coldly. You wrote the sequence. You should recognize it. Syraxis didn't smile. The scent is wrong. She's not in heat, Zevian replied. She's in command. That was when Syraxis stood. And his voice rolled down like thunder into the chamber. Enough. The music died. Rowenna froze mid-step, one arm raised, her breath heaving. She has performed the sequence, Syraxis announced, gaze sweeping the trembling audience. She has shown us the line between chaos and control. A pause. Then, she will now be marked. For the record. For the law. Rowenna's blood turned to ice. No, she whispered. Windborn, Syraxis declared, shall be claimed and sealed by the trainer who first saw her rise. Alpha Zevian Drelthorn. The audience gasped. Rowenna's legs nearly gave. Zevian didn't move. Syraxis turned toward him. Proceed. The silence stretched. Zevian looked down at the she-wolf standing in the circle. Her chest rose and fell in shuddering breaths. Her lips were bloodless. And yet, in her eyes, not terror, but fury. If he moved toward her, she would not run. She would fight. And still, his instincts screamed. Every cell in his body howled, touch her. Claim her. End this. But another voice, quieter, whispered, "If you do, she'll never forgive you. And she'll never be yours." He stepped forward. Just once. Rowenna didn't flinch. But her voice was steel. "You try to mark me," she said, "and I'll bite through my own tongue before the claim finishes." He stopped. Around them, the crowd held its breath. Syraxis's voice boomed again. "You hesitate." Zevian looked up, jaw tight. "She's not ready. She's compliant." She danced. "She performed," Zevian corrected. "She never submitted." Syraxis's eyes narrowed. "Then mark her and make it true." Zevian's hands clenched. Rowenna's eyes locked to his. Not pleading, but waiting, testing. His next choice would not unmake the system, but it would decide everything. And so he turned to Syraxis and said, "In due time." Syraxis exhaled, then smiled. "Then we shall wait." But as the chamber emptied and the ritual ended, no one noticed that several Alpha patrons had to be escorted from the room, trembling, panting, changed. They had not watched a performance. They had inhaled a warning. And Rowenna? She stood in the center of the circle, the silk clinging to her blood-warm skin, her chest rising with defiant breaths, her body shaking. But her heart burning with only one truth. They didn't break her. They let her in. Chapter 11, The Pleasure Cell. They took her at dawn. No warning. No explanation. Just a silent order and 2 masked handlers who bound her wrists in ceremonial silk and led her down a spiral staircase that bled deeper into the spire's underbelly than she knew existed. The air changed the moment they crossed the vault threshold, warmer, thicker, sweetened by artificial spice and old breath. Even Rowenna's wind, always whispering to her with clarity and direction, felt slow here. Drugged. The obedience vault had no doors, only curtains. And behind each velvet drape, a chamber, a space, a lesson. They guided her into one shaped like a crescent, its walls glistening with condensation. Floor cushions were arranged in semicircles. The scent of sweat clung to the stone like a second skin. And in the center, the instruction platform waited, smooth slate polished by 100 bodies before hers. She was not alone. Other females knelt around the chamber, naked or half-covered, each one a different story of surrender. The vault mistress stood above them. Mara, draped in wolf-black silk and silver chains, her eyes lined with scent powder, she paced like a panther bored with her prey. "Today," Mara said, "you will learn pleasure." Rowenna's jaw clenched. Mara's smile curved. "Not the kind you control. The kind we give you. When you stop trying to survive it, you might start to need it." She flicked her fingers. Rowenna's wrists were untied, then retied, behind her back. Mara gestured again. "Lie down." Rowenna did not move. One of the guards stepped forward. "On your stomach, 0487. Still, she remained standing. Mara raised an eyebrow. And then, without warning, a curtain pulled back to reveal a single Alpha seated on the upper observation balcony, behind a one-way scent screen. Zevian. He sat motionless, hands clasped, eyes hidden behind the thin veil. But she could feel him. The way a cliff feels the storm wind before it breaks. Rowenna's heart slammed against her ribs. So this was it. They wanted her to fold in front of him. She walked to the center of the stone, turned, met the veil, and slowly lowered herself. Not as a wolf submitting, but as a fuse curling toward the flame. She lay on her stomach, bare skin against cool stone, wrists bound behind her. Her cheek touched the slate. She didn't close her eyes. Mara knelt beside her, held a bowl of crushed spice and heated oil. She dipped her fingers in, dragged the mixture across Rowenna's back, spine to tailbone, in slow, deliberate strokes. Rowenna's skin flared red instantly. Every nerve flinched. The oil was designed to stimulate. Every inch it touched woke as if from sleep, made more vulnerable, more hungry. Another stroke. Down her side. Her hip twitched. She bit her lip. Mara leaned in, her lips just above Rowenna's ear. "This isn't to hurt you," she whispered. "It's to open you. To make your body beg before your voice does." Rowenna's breath trembled. The scent in the room shifted, new notes added now. Musk. Sweat. The faint chemical edge of synthetic alpha pheromones piped in from behind the stone. Her thighs pressed together without thinking. She cursed herself for it. But Mara noticed. "Good," she murmured. "Let it in." The heat deepened. Her skin broke into a fine sheen of sweat. Her cheeks flushed. And then, the whisper. From her left. Another girl. Younger. Barely more than 16. Voice like a feather, "I saw you dance." Rowenna didn't answer aloud. She tilted her head, just slightly. The girl whispered again. "I know what you are." Rowenna's wind sense pulsed between them, a flicker of breath exchanged like a secret handshake. And the girl's answer, clear, soft, defiant, "Ira." Rowenna's breath caught. A name. A sign. She had found one. Mara's hand returned, this time drawing circles across her lower back. Pressure increasing. Heat spreading. "You're flushed," Mara said. "You're ready." A second instructor approached with a stone diffuser. Scent burst into the room. Rowenna's eyes slammed shut. Alpha. Real. Zevians. Not piped. Not filtered. She knew it. Her body knew it. The heat between her legs surged without her permission. Her wrists strained against the bonds. Her mouth opened in a silent gasp. No, not like this. She turned her face against the stone and bit her own finger until she tasted iron. The pain grounded her. She wouldn't moan, wouldn't give them the sound they wanted. But she trembled. Violently. Her body ached in too many directions. Not from desire, but from restraint. And on the balcony above, Zevian rose to his feet. The scent in the room recoiled, as if the source had been cut. Mara looked up annoyed. But Zevian didn't speak. He only stared through the veil at the shape of her, the curve of her back, the arch of her hips, the tension in her bound shoulders. He clenched his fists. "She's going to break," Mara said. "One more session, and she'll be pliant." Zevian said nothing, but his silence vibrated with something almost dangerous. Almost possessive. Later, when the cell was dim and the scent had faded, Rowenna lay curled in the corner on cold stone. The chains were gone. The pain was not. The girl with her, the one who'd whispered, crawled close. "You carved something," she said. Rowenna nodded toward the far wall. The girl crawled to it, ran her finger over the jagged, shaky letter etched in blood and nail. "E." A whisper passed between them again. Not voice, not breath, but wind. Connection. And Rowenna finally allowed herself to smile. They thought they'd burned the fire out of her. But fires that are starved? They don't die. They wait. Behind the wall, a scribe whispered to Mara, "She still hasn't buckled." Mara sighed. Then escalate. Next phase, sensory display. In the citadel above, Zevian stood alone at the edge of his private dream chamber. He couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her bound to stone. Not broken. Not surrendered. But shaking, as if the cage itself couldn't decide whether to hold her or let her loose. He whispered her name into the dark. And the wind answered back. Chapter 12. The Fire That Would Not Light. They gave her 20 minutes alone in the washroom. 20 minutes to scrub the scent of the obedience vault off her skin. 20 minutes to bathe in silence before the next sequence of humiliations resumed. They shouldn't have given her 20 minutes. The room was narrow, wooden-floored, dimly lit by lanterns hung on chains that swayed in rhythm with the heat. Water steamed in shallow stone basins, fogging the corners, making everything feel dreamlike. Disarmed. Safe. But Rowenna's body was never safe. It remembered. The oils on her skin still burned. Every nerve ached from the earlier training. The scent of synthetic alpha still clung behind her ears, no matter how many times she dunked her head under water and came up gasping. She knelt beside one of the benches and began to undo the ties around her wrists with teeth sharpened by survival. She listened for footsteps, counted breaths, and reached under the loose wooden plank beneath the bench. The bundle was small, wrapped in old cloth. Inside, crushed flame leaf and oil-soaked bone resin, gifted by Lisa in a moment of passing touch, passed hand to hand in silence and trust. Enough to set the wood and silk interior of the washroom ablaze. Enough to spark panic. Enough to make them feel what it meant to be devoured by something uncontrollable. She rolled it in the towel, then crushed it beneath her heel. The oil spread. The scent rose, hot, bitter, dangerous. She dragged the mixture in a line from basin to basin, from the curtain rail to the door hinges. She pulled the flint from her waistband, the one they hadn't found because it had been hidden inside her mouth, behind a molar cap. She struck. Once. Twice. The spark leapt. The towel caught. Fire licked up the wall. She stepped back, sweat already beginning to bead. But the flames faltered. The steam in the room thickened. Condensation poured down from the ceiling in heavy drops. The wood beneath her feet hissed, but did not burn. Her heart raced. The towel flared, then fizzled. Too wet. Too soaked. The fire couldn't feed. She struck again. Harder. Faster. The sparks flew, but drowned in the damp. It wasn't that she hadn't planned well enough. It was her body. Her own body. The heat in her veins, the mate response they'd forced again and again. It soaked her skin, her scent, her every corner in readiness, in sweat, in weakness. Her body betrayed her. Again. Not to pain, but to moisture. The fire would not light. Behind her, a throat cleared. She turned. Barrick stood in the threshold. A low-ranking patrol overseer, but loyal to Syraxis. And worse, fond of the sight of broken things. Well, he said, stepping inside, what a naughty little wolf. Rowenna didn't move. Clothes off, he barked. You don't get to wear the veil of obedience after attempting arson. She bared her teeth. He snapped his fingers. 2 guards entered. They didn't beat her. They didn't bind her. They just stripped her, slow, methodical, as if every tug of silk was its own sentence. Then they dragged her through the halls of the spire, up into open air, into sunlight so bright it cut like knives. Threefold Spire's central square was always populated. Today, it was crowded. A sea of robed patrons, noble alphas, trainers, clerks, scent readers, dream recorders. And above them all, Syraxis. He stood atop the judgment stair, robes like falling night, hands folded. They brought her to the iron hook. Hung her by her wrists. Fully bare. Ankles chained. Toes barely brushing the hot stone beneath her. A low murmur ran through the crowd. She's smaller than I thought. Look at the red hair. That's the Windborn? They say she doesn't bleed unless she wants to. They say she doesn't scream. She'll scream. Her skin burned beneath their stares more than fire ever could. But she said nothing. She didn't close her eyes. She let them look. Her sweat dripped down her spine. And when Syraxis finally raised his voice, it fell over them like velvet wrapped around a blade. Windborn has refused submission. She has rejected scent. Rejected structure. Rejected mercy. Her actions betray not only the system, but herself. He stepped forward. Therefore, she shall face the final sequence, the sensory challenge. Murmurs rippled again. She will be displayed under the guidance of the only alpha who has drawn response from her body. His eyes met Zevian's, high on the eastern balcony, frozen in place, unreadable. Trainer Zevian Drelthorn shall oversee her final obedience. The crowd exhaled in hungry awe. Zevian didn't move. But Rowenna looked right at him. Naked. Hung exposed. But not broken. Not yet. She opened her mouth. And her voice was low, hoarse, thick with heat and fury. You can hang me. You can starve me. You can parade me in the square and make your little princes drool. But I'll say it once, and only once. I am not your animal. I will not die kneeling. The silence hit hard. Syraxis did not flinch. But a smile ghosted his lips. Oh, little wolf, he said softly. You misunderstand. We do not want you to die kneeling. We want you to live long enough to know that you already have." That night, in the dim halls of the citadel, Zevian stood in front of the sealed ritual chamber where she would be taken next. The place where scent would become blade, where instinct would become spectacle. And for the first time since he was a child, he felt something impossible. Fear. Because the closer he came to touching her, the more certain he became she would burn him alive. Chapter 13. The Binding Ritual. The binding vault was silent as the grave. No scent. No sound. Only the breath of anticipation, taut and expectant, humming in the obsidian air. Rowenna stood in the center of the ritual circle, the impression zone, etched in ash and old bone. The walls pulsed with slow, deliberate glow, runes flickering like distant heartbeats. The ceiling above was carved open in a star-shaped dome, moonlight falling like a blade onto her bare shoulders. They had stripped her of everything. The perfumed water had burned her skin. The scent oils clung to her neck and inner thighs, designed not to soothe, but to sensitize. Her ceremonial cloth was thin as spider silk, draped over her hips, barely concealing the lines of her body. Her breasts were bare, her feet raw against the cold stone. The ritualist, Avra, stood nearby, her face veiled in gold-threaded mesh, her hands wrapped in dream balm-soaked gauze. Her voice, when she spoke, echoed with the weight of tradition. Subject 0487, Windborn, shall now receive scent induction. Rowenna did not flinch. She did not kneel. Her breath, however, betrayed her, already unsteady, already thickening in her throat as the air began to shift. Because she could feel him. Zevian. He entered the vault without announcement. No ceremonial cloak. No gilded color. Just a black tunic that clung to his frame like smoke. His throat was bare. His scent already waking the air around him like a storm front. She saw the flicker in his jaw as he took her in. Not just her body. Her rage. Her defiance. Her unbrokenness. Avra gestured. Trainer Zevian Drelthorn, begin scent release. He stepped forward. Rowenna's breath hitched. She hated that she felt it. The way the room grew hotter, not physically, but instinctually. The way her legs trembled, not from fear, but from some deep, primeval wiring in her blood. Her body betrayed her again, slick already building beneath the silk between her thighs. Zevian stopped just short of the ring's edge. Rowenna, he said, low, like a whisper only the two of them could hear. Don't speak to me, she hissed. Avra lifted her hand. No speech outside invocation. Zevian ignored her. I don't want to do this, he said, eyes locked to Rowenna's. Then don't. You know I can't stop this. You mean you won't, she spat. Because deep down, you want to see what I'll become if I break. He stepped over the ring. The circle pulsed. Rowenna swayed. The scent hit her like a tide, wild pine, frost wind, and crushed heat. It wound around her legs, up her stomach, into her lungs, curling behind her tongue. Her knees buckled. She did not fall. Her hands curled into fists, nails cutting into her palms. She was panting now, slow, shallow gasps that made her chest rise and fall with unsteady rhythm. Dream response detected, Avra intoned. No, Rowenna whispered. That's not submission. That's survival. Zevian stepped closer. She could see the tension in his throat. The way his scent deepened, reacting to her. His pupils were blown wide. He was not immune. He was fighting himself. And then he said it. If you told me to leave this, all of it, the auctions, the legacy, the tower. His voice broke. I would. She froze. His voice dropped to a trembling whisper, right at her ear. If you said you wanted me, I'd burn it down for you. Tears rose in her eyes, unbidden, unwanted. She turned to look at him. Their breath collided. Their instincts cracked like lightning between them. And then she smiled. Soft. Bloody. Final. I want you, she said. His eyes widened. She leaned in, close enough for her lips to brush his. To die, she finished, in my arms. Gasping. Knowing it was me who undid you. His expression shattered. He stepped back. Avra's voice rang again. Subject resisted full dream kneel. No mark impression achieved. Silence. Then, slow, deliberate applause. Syraxis had entered at some point, cloaked in bone-trimmed robes, arms folded behind his back. This one is entertaining, he mused. I was wrong to treat her as just a symbol. She may yet serve. Rowenna didn't move. Didn't speak. Let's make her a lesson, Syraxis continued. One all alpha kind will learn from. He turned to the crowd of onlookers behind the veil. Begin preparations for the sensory challenge. 100 alphas. One she-wolf. Zevian flinched. Rowenna didn't. She was already gone inside. Not broken, but lit from within. Not by heat, by vengeance. And this time, she wouldn't need fire to burn the tower down. Chapter 14, The 100 Eyes. The circle was not made for mercy. It was built for vision. Row upon row of tiered seats surrounded the central arena, each one occupied by wolves with titles carved into their necks and coin thicker than their conscience. Alphas from every bloodline, border, and bastion of the realm leaned forward in silence. They weren't here to bid. They were here to watch her break. Rowenna was led in barefoot, the soles of her feet blackened from ceremonial dust, the rest of her coated in light, oil, gold thread, ritual scent, and sweat. Her wrists were wrapped in braided silk, her breasts left bare beneath latticework chains, and her mouth half covered with gauze, just sheer enough to reveal the line of her lips. She was not blindfolded. She had earned the right to see them. And they wanted her to see. Every look, every smirk, every slow-lidded calculation of her body as she stepped into the dream-marked center of the arena, the observation circle. Above, Zevian stood in the tribunal arch, framed in black stone, arms locked behind his back. He didn't speak, but he watched. He hadn't looked away since she entered. Syraxis stood to his left, robes rustling as he leaned into the mic-rum sphere. Windborn, begin display sequence. The voice rang out across the vault. Rowenna inhaled. It wasn't oxygen she needed. It was control. Her knees buckled into position 1, submissive kneel. Her spine straight, palms flat on her thighs. Position 2, the ritualist intoned. She tilted her head back, exposing her neck. Every nerve in her throat screamed. 3. She opened her mouth, exhaled. Just enough to show her body temperature rising. 4. A whimper. Small. Controlled. Weaponized. A murmur moved through the gallery. She's dream reactive. Highly conditioned. No scent spike, though. She's holding back. Rowenna was not holding back. She was loading. Every chant under her breath a thread. Every muscle movement a net. She let her fingers tremble, just enough to sell vulnerability. But her eyes, they were still. Carved from ice. In the 6th tier, a girl shifted. Young. Rogue-marked. Disguised as a servant pouring wine. Rowenna lifted her left brow, just a twitch. The girl inhaled sharply. Then collapsed. Gasps rose from the crowd. She's gone into early estrus. Dream bleed. Did the she-wolf trigger it? Avra moved to intervene. But the timing was too late. As they attended to the fallen rogue, Rowenna flicked her ankle. A glint of metal dropped from the folds of silk, rolled soundlessly beneath the altar at center stage. A sliver of carved resin. Old. Banned. A dreamfire tooth. Placed exactly where it needed to be. The stage had been seeded. Now it only had to ignite. Resume sequence, Syraxis snapped. Rowenna knelt again, hair clinging to the sweat along her spine. Her thighs were slick, the scent in the room shifting. But not from heat. From instinctual fear. Not hers. Theirs. Zevian hadn't moved. But his eyes. They burned. He could feel it. What she was doing. What she was risking. And what it would cost her. And still, he didn't stop it. Because he couldn't look away. You're trembling, the voice from the platform called. Only because your system taught me to, she whispered. Syraxis lifted his hand. Let us test the limits of her defiance. From the opposite arch, a heavy-shouldered alpha stepped forward. Older, scarred, rank-stained and retired from command, but holding ceremonial rights. If she's so unaffected, the alpha growled, let me use teeth. Rowenna did not flinch. Zevian stepped forward, teeth bared. She's not to be touched. Syraxis glanced at him. Simulated mark protocol only. You'll have your turn. The alpha stepped onto the stage. His presence darkened the space. His scent rolled over her like tar, heavy, acidic, violent. Rowenna's stomach turned. But her knees didn't fold. He circled her once. Twice. She didn't follow him with her gaze. She followed the wind. And the wind said, wait. He leaned close. His breath hit her shoulder. Pretty thing, he whispered. All dressed up just to kneel for a pack of wolves. Rowenna smiled through the gauze. Is that what they tell you? That we kneel for you? She turned her head. Maybe you should ask your mate why she only moans when you're asleep. He snarled. His hand moved fast. Rowenna moved faster. Her head snapped up. Teeth bared, not in submission, but in warning. The ceremonial gauze fell from her mouth as she growled. Not a moan. Not a whimper. A warning. For every alpha watching. For the system. For the gods, if they were listening. Syraxis didn't blink. He turned to Avra. Commence final sequence. Next stage. Simulated imprint aggression. Zevian's voice cut the silence like a blade. You won't survive her. It was unclear if he meant the alphas. Or himself. Rowenna stood. She stood. In the center of the arena. Surrounded by hundreds of eyes. And didn't fall. Didn't cry. Didn't yield. And in her heart a voice whispered. They say I'm desirable. I say this is a survival pose. Chapter 15. The teeth that almost touched her. There was no sound inside the trial column. Only breath. Only the distant echo of 1,000 heartbeats, muffled behind enchanted glass and stone, all watching, waiting. Rowenna stood inside the pillar, arms locked in front, the transparent seal wrapping her body in a vertical tomb of performance. Her skin still glistened with scent oils, her breath already shallow, the floor cold beneath her feet. She had endured everything until now. But this wasn't about endurance anymore. This was about touch. The kind meant to brand. The kind meant to ruin. Outside the column, the crowd's whispers curled like smoke. And then he stepped into the light. Maldrek. Low-tier alpha. Former blood hulk of the Southern Barrens. Scarred, bloated with rut pride, and blessed by nothing but his ability to terrify. He licked his bottom lip as he approached. The column shimmered and hissed as the scent barrier dissolved for entry. The judges called it scent threshold breach. Rowenna called it permission. Zevian stood on the outer ring. He was silent. But his eyes, when they locked onto hers, were screaming. He had been assigned this supervisory trial under the guise of neutrality. But there was nothing neutral about the way his fists clenched as Maldrek approached the pillar. Nothing neutral about how he watched Rowenna's arms shake as the heat in the trial chamber rose to unbearable levels. Enter, Avra announced. Maldrek smiled. The pillar's shield peeled back, exposing Rowenna's upper chest and neck, collarbone to navel. Her arms remained locked behind her. The impression zone was live. Maldrek stepped in. No words. No ceremony. He leaned in and exhaled against her collarbone. Her knees buckled slightly. He didn't touch her. Not yet. But his scent did. It was crude. Fermented dominance and synthetic rut extract. It flooded her nostrils, sent false signals to the pit of her stomach. Her thighs twitched. She bit the inside of her cheek. And still, Maldrek got closer. Pretty thing, he rasped, licking his bottom lip again. Still untouched. Should I be your first? Rowenna's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Her throat seized. Her body reacted. It wanted to recoil. To disappear. But she had nowhere to go. Maldrek leaned forward. His lips brushed the base of her throat. Not a kiss. An evaluation. He opened his mouth. Let his teeth graze the hollow behind her ear, the soft, pulse-thick place where the mating mark was always made. The heat behind her eyes exploded. Her breath shattered into fragments. Her knees folded. He didn't bite. But his teeth almost did. And in that half-second of suspended horror, she cried. Not loud. Not broken. A single tear. Sliding down the side of her cheek and vanishing into the collarbone he hadn't yet bruised. Zevian moved. No command. No permission. He moved like a predator released from leash. Leapt from the tribunal level, boots cracking against the marble floor of the pillar base, and slammed into the column. The barrier buckled. And then broke. The audience screamed. But all Rowenna saw was Maldrek's hand reaching again. And then Zevian's fist. Straight into Maldrek's mouth. Bone cracked. Blood sprayed across the stone. Maldrek staggered. Zevian tackled him to the ground, one knee on the brute's chest, one hand on his throat. You think you can smell her? He growled. Try doing it without a tongue. A flash of metal. One motion. Zevian cut the muscle from Maldrek's mouth in a single motion of fury. Maldrek gurgled. Screamed through blood. Twitched like a dying beast. The crowd erupted in chaos. Syraxis stood in silence. Then raised his hand. The room silenced. Let it stand, he said coldly. She endured the ritual without a mark. The alpha failed to imprint. That is what matters. He turned to Rowenna. Her knees gave out. She collapsed, trembling, not from touch, but from the void just after. That moment where she knew her body would have broken. And she didn't even know who she would have been afterward. Zevian didn't reach for her. He looked at her. And she looked back. Not grateful. Not angry. Just empty. Later, in the healing vault, Rowenna lay under fever balm and moon salves. Her body slick with sweat, her limbs twitching with residual scent shock. She couldn't speak. But she thought. Over and over. I almost broke. But they haven't picked me yet. If I can't stop them before they choose me. Her hand clenched the sheet. I have to kill the choice itself. Outside, the final verdict was being read. She would advance. To the final trial. Where she must choose one alpha. To bite her. To claim her. To finish her story. Unless she finished theirs first. Chapter 16, The Last Knife. The ceremonial veil itched against Rowenna's face. Too soft. Too clean. Too white. It felt like being dressed for her own funeral. She stood in the dressing chamber, mirrors lining the walls like 1,000 cold witnesses. The silk of the blessing gown trailed over her thighs in gold-lined folds, its scent laced with light heat-inducing herbs meant to trigger docile shivering in unmarked she-wolves. The dressing aides had left after threading her collar into place, assuming she would wait obediently for the escort bell. She didn't. As soon as the last lock clicked, Rowenna moved. Behind the wardrobe hung a carved panel, one she had noticed days ago when being measured, when she counted the steps between walls and windows. She pressed a thumb against the lower edge, and the wood creaked open, revealing a dark, narrow passage that led deeper into the spire's undergut. The scent hit her immediately. Spice. Musk. Oil. Heat. She had reached the scent storage corridor. This was where they kept the volatile mixes, the ones used during mark ceremonies, the ones that ignited physiological responses so deep even seasoned wolves wept during trial. And it was where she planned to end this. She slid through the hall, bare feet silent on stone. Her heart pounded, but not from fear. She had Lisa. Lisa, who had found the matchsticks, who'd stolen the veil pin with the flammable tip, who waited now just ahead, hunched behind a row of dripping scent jars. You made it, Lisa whispered. Her hand trembled as she passed the cloth-wrapped fire start. Rowenna met her gaze. You sure? Lisa smiled, small and fierce. I'd rather burn beside you than kneel for them. Rowenna bent low, her hands working quickly. The oil lines were marked by color, the deep red for arousal, the silver for docility, the pale yellow for dream trigger. She aimed for all three. They ran the fuses through the corridor like veins. She didn't need to light the body. She only needed to light the blood. Lisa lit the first thread. It hissed. Rowenna lit the second. It sparked. And then, a door slammed open behind them. Stop. Two guards burst into the corridor, scent armor glinting. Rowenna didn't hesitate. She shoved the last thread beneath the nearest vat, twisted Lisa's arm, and hissed, "Run." But Lisa didn't run. One guard tackled Rowenna. The other reached for Lisa, and she turned too late. His elbow struck the side of her head, cracking bone against stone. She crumpled. Rowenna screamed. Something cracked inside her throat, raw and primal. Lisa's eyes fluttered once before she went limp, blood already pooling. Rowenna surged forward, but the first guard twisted her wrist behind her back. She thrashed, bit him, tore skin from his arm. He shouted, "She's wild." They dragged Lisa toward the hallway exit. One boot slipped in the oil, and her head struck the doorframe with a sickening thud before vanishing into the dark. Rowenna was choking on her own breath. "No, no, no, Lisa, no." The second guard tried to haul her upright. She snapped her head back, catching him in the chin, then dropped and rolled, using the oil-slick floor to her advantage. She made it to the grating at the far end. Kicked it once. Twice. It gave. She slipped through. Fell. Dropped 10 feet into the pit below. The blood spring chamber. She landed hard. The fall knocked wind from her lungs, and for a moment, she couldn't move. When her breath returned, it was wet. Not with water. With blood. The chamber was sacred, they said. Where wolves who failed the trials were bled and their unworthy essence returned to the tower. Rowenna stared at her hands, red to the wrists. Her reflection in the blood-shimmering surface of the pool showed a ghost. A wolf wrapped in silk and fury and failure. She crawled to the side, huddled there, and wept. Not for her body. Not for her pride. But for Lisa. She licked the wound on her arm, torn when she'd tried to claw her way back, and whispered. "I couldn't save her." Her voice cracked. "I couldn't save anyone." Her body shook, not with fever, but with something colder. "I'm not a weapon. I'm a bitch in heat who cried when they touched her neck." She curled into herself as though smaller meant less guilty. "I'm just a dog," she whispered. "I'm just a mad bitch who moaned under their scent and let a girl die for me." She held once, muffled it with her fist. And somewhere far above, the bell tolled for punishment. In the tower's high tribunal, Syraxis reviewed the incident report with calm disinterest. Attempted arson. Assault. Coordinated effort. Rogue assistance. He looked to the clerics. Move her to high watch. And use the girl, Lisa, for public degradation display. The room nodded. 3 days, he said. Then execute her. The papers were stamped. Rowenna emerged hours later, cleaned only by blood and silence. She stood in the mirror chamber again, alone now, and began to tie her hair back. Not as a prisoner, not as a symbol, but as a soldier. One who had just lost her last knife, and would now use her teeth. Chapter 17. The Bath of Blooming Heat. The red moon bath was carved into the stone like a wound, long, deep, and steaming. Its walls glistened with mineral sheen, lit by the pulsing red glow of moss lanterns. The scent of blood lotus and crushed heatroot thickened the air like honey over open flame. It was the Alpha Bath. No one who didn't bear a mark was meant to enter it. But Rowenna was not marked. Not yet. That was the whole point. 2 masked attendants waited at the threshold. Neither of them met her eyes as they unfastened her robe. The silk fell. Her skin prickled. Not from chill, there was none here, but from the weight of air, of ritual, of what came next. She was not just naked. She was offered. As she stepped forward, one of the attendants anointed her shoulders with amber-slicked oil. The other knelt and poured steaming water over her thighs, letting it trail between them like a violation disguised as ceremony. They murmured nothing. Their hands never lingered. But the scent they left behind, theirs and hers and the baths stayed. Swelled. Bloomed. The final attendant reached up and unclasped the gold ring from her throat. Only then did she look up. Zevian was waiting in the water. He sat on the opposite side of the pool, half submerged, dark tunic soaked and open at the chest. His sleeves clung to his arms, wet to the elbow. He wasn't looking at her body. But he was looking. Syraxis's words echoed in her skull. If you cannot control the dream pressure of a heat bath, you are no alpha. You are a boy. So here they were. Zevian's eyes darkened as Rowenna descended the stairs into the water. The heat curled up her legs in ghostly tendrils. By the time it reached her hips, her breath was shallow. She took another step. The bath swallowed her waist. Her ribs. Another step, and her breasts dipped beneath the surface. The water lapped at her collarbone, its heat designed to trigger submission responses, to coax the dream musk of an unclaimed female into full bloom. Her body obeyed. Her mind fought. She sat on the submerged ledge. Her knees pressed together. Her toes curled into the stone floor. And still, Zevian watched. His scent, always controlled, distant, began to thicken. Rowenna's head rolled back slightly as her pulse rose. She gritted her teeth. The pressure in her abdomen built with every second. Her thighs clenched. Her chest lifted and fell with a rhythm no longer her own. I didn't ask for this, she rasped. Zevian didn't respond. He sat with his elbows on his knees, his fists tight, his jaw locked. She looked at him now, fully, face to face, chest to chest, scent to scent. The air between them was fire. I'll break, she whispered. Don't let me beg. His voice was hoarse. Then don't speak. Her eyes fluttered. She swayed slightly. Heat climbed her throat. Her lips parted. A soft sound, half gasp, half sob, slipped free. She hated the sound. Hated herself for making it. Hated that he didn't move. But then, he did. Zevian pushed off the far edge of the pool and crossed to her with one slow, submerged step after another. Ripples spread. Her breath hitched again. He reached her. Didn't touch her. Only leaned close. Close enough to make the heat between them unbearable. He looked at her lips. At her throat. At her neck, the markless spot just below her ear. Her body shivered. If you touch me now, she whispered, trembling, I'll beg you not to stop. Zevian exhaled through his nose, sharply. Then leaned in. His lips brushed her throat. Not a kiss. A warning. A promise. She arched without meaning to. His teeth grazed skin. He paused. Time thickened. Rowenna's nails dug into her palms. Her legs shook. She was so close to begging, so close to breaking. Then, he pulled away. He stepped back. And with shaking fingers, he reached for the stone edge of the pool. In a place only she could see, just under the steam-slicked rim, he drew a mark with the tip of his wet thumb. A single curved line. Backwards. A claw in reverse. Rowenna stared at it. Her body was still spiraling from the scent, but her mind locked onto the symbol. It meant defiance. It meant reversal. It meant, I am not what they think I am. He looked at her once more. Then left the water. She sat in silence as the door closed behind him. The heat around her pulsed and surged, but not just from scent. From knowing. Zevian had made his choice. And now she had to make hers. Chapter 18, The Teeth of the Law. The public tribunal was already full when they dragged her in. Rowenna's feet scraped against polished stone, her ankles shackled, wrists bound in scent-dampened leather that smelled like submission. Her gown had been replaced with ceremonial whites, thin, nearly translucent linen that clung to every trembling contour of her body. She'd stopped struggling. Not from fear. From depletion. They had taken her strength in pieces, like meat off bone. Sleep in half-rationed dreams. Breath in chambers too tight. Dignity in every whispered command that called her product instead of person. Now they were after her skin. The mark spot. The place just beneath the ear, soft, vulnerable, pulsing. the place her body had been wired to crave. Syraxis raised both hands before the crowd, his voice effortlessly amplified by the tower's dream ring. By decree of ceremonial law, he intoned, the wind-born she-wolf has been found to possess an anomalous mate reactivity profile. Her dream sensitivity exceeds ritual thresholds. Therefore, correction is required. The crowd didn't murmur. They purred. Alpha scent began to rise in waves, controlled, expectant. Syraxis smiled. One toothless mark, performed under sanction. No penetration. No fluids. No bond. The lie was in the ritual's name, the non-bite. But every she-wolf knew the truth. It didn't take fangs to scar you. Zevian was already waiting at the edge of the platform. He looked carved from stillness. His black uniform pressed flat against his chest, eyes locked forward. Rowenna saw his jaw move, once, as if he was saying her name without sound. Then he stepped forward. She was fastened into the restraint ring, arms pinned behind her back, neck arched, knees pressed into the marble circle. Her breath came in sharp, irregular puffs. The scent in the room was rising. Not hers. Theirs. Zevian stood over her. She didn't look up. Her skin was flushed. Her pulse pounded against the spot just below her ear. He crouched. A ceremonial knife was placed in his hand, not to cut, but to tap the center of her spine, triggering the neurological signal required for dream release. Part of the process. He touched it gently to her back. Her body jerked. From the pain memory? No. From the memory of wanting. Zevian leaned forward. She could feel his breath now, hot against her neck. The room had gone silent. She couldn't move. Her fingers twitched in the bindings. He brought his mouth near. The heat of his lips ghosted over her skin, just beside the scent gland. He didn't touch her. Not yet. But her body was already reacting, blood rushing to the surface, skin glowing pink, thighs trembling. She whimpered. Hated herself. A single tear slid down her cheek. Then, he pressed his mouth to her neck. Soft. Not biting. Not sucking. Just resting. The simulation. Her eyes rolled back for a moment. The silence shattered, gasps, purrs, whispers of approval. She couldn't breathe. He lingered. And then, he spoke. Low. Into her skin. I didn't want to do this. She didn't answer. I'm not trying to ruin you, he whispered. I'm just scared someone else would. She closed her eyes. And broke. Not aloud. Not violently. Just something inside her fell in. When he pulled back, her body was trembling in silence. Syraxis raised his hand again. The subject has submitted to the mark simulation. No bond formed. But the imprint was received. Rowenna felt like her soul had been carved open. Her skin still burned where he hadn't bitten her. Zevian stood, backed away. She opened her mouth. Words scraped their way out. You didn't bite me, she whispered, her voice cracking. But you still tore away the last piece of me I had. Syraxis turned, lips curling. She's beginning to understand, he said to the crowd. She's finally learning to kneel. The alphas roared with approval. Lust. Triumph. Ritual satisfaction. But they didn't see the way Rowenna's fingertips flexed in their bindings. They didn't notice how she turned her head slightly, locking eyes with Zevian. Not in blame. In calculation. She had nothing left now. Except the fire. And soon, she would set it loose. Chapter 19, The Scent That Broke Them. The floor beneath Rowenna's bare feet had been powdered with fire dust. With every step, it sparked. Each grain caught flame under her skin, igniting like stars, leaving a brief trail of glowing heat as she moved, slow, sinuous, merciless. Above, the golden dome of the spire glowed with moonlight. Below, hundreds of alpha eyes burned holes into her. She was no longer bound. Not with ropes. Tonight, she danced. Because they had told her to. Because it was tradition. Because before the auction, there must be temptation. Syraxis had named her the exemplary flame, the chosen demonstrator of prime heat response behavior. A body made to be watched. A scent made to be unleashed. They had injected her with blooming liquid, essence of catalyst bloom, a flower so rare it could only grow in wolves who'd nearly been broken. It didn't heal. It revealed. And inside her now, it churned. Spreading. Awakening everything. The music started. A low pulse of drums from behind the scent curtains. A wind from the outer terrace blew in. It carried the altered incense, the rogue-made blend that she and her sisters had slipped into the heating braziers hours before. On the surface, it smelled like submission and spice. But underneath? It carried something far older. Far hungrier. Rowenna lifted her arms, and the thin gold veils over her body drifted into motion, revealing skin slick with sweat and glowing with moon oil. The scars on her knees. The bruise still dark at her ribs. The markless patch on her neck. Unclaimed. Deliberately. She moved. Her ankle twisted as she turned, sparks flying as fire dust scattered. Her hips rocked forward, back, slow rotations that sent the thin veils swirling. The scent hit the crowd. Alpha stiffened. The shift was nearly imperceptible at first. A few leaned forward. Inhaled deeper. Some blinked and blinked again, as though memory had fled them mid-thought. The scent was climbing. Her skin exhaled it. Her heat wasn't rising, it was radiating. The liquid in her blood pulsed out in waves, syncopated with her heartbeat. The drumline behind the curtain sped up, the tempo catching on instinct. Rowenna tilted her head back, hair swinging like black silk over the curve of her spine. Her mouth parted. Her eyes never focused. She looked like she was somewhere else. Not among them. Not human. Not wolf. Divine. Or damned. The alphas could no longer sit still. Fingers clawed into arms of thrones. Throats rumbled with the beginnings of growls. One of them, young, already battle-scarred, let out a sound between a snarl and a moan. His hands gripped the stone so hard it cracked. Rowenna turned slowly. Let her hands skim over her own thighs, over the soft flare of her hip bones, over her belly. The scent burst like a wave. Several in the back rows shifted, partially, violently, claws half forming before they collapsed backward, stunned by their own loss of control. In the shadows, Seraxis smiled. But not out of pleasure. Out of calculation. Because he knew. This wasn't art. It was rebellion. Behind the brazier curtains, 3 rogue she-wolves whispered wind rhythms under their breath, timed to the breath of the room. One of them closed her eyes and sent a whisper through the air. 6th pillars down. Rowenna heard it, felt it, and danced harder. She was shaking now, whether from the heat in her bloodstream or the roar rising in the pit of her stomach, she didn't know. The catalyst bloom had turned her scent into a drug. But it wasn't just the scent. It was the sight. She threw her head back. Let her lips part. Let her fingers trace the spot beneath her neck where no bite had ever landed. The men watching couldn't breathe. The women watching couldn't look away. Her pupils dilated. Her thighs trembled. She began to fall forward. Planned. Perfect. Right into the exact pose of a she-wolf in heat submission. The room shattered. Half a dozen alphas surged forward from their seats. Growling. Clawing. No longer men. Not quite beasts. Seraxis raised his hand and pressed the obsidian sigil beside his seat. The dream ring detonated. The wave that hit her was like drowning in fire. 100 alpha sent points clamped down in her mind at once. Every nerve lit with forced obedience. Rowenna's limbs spasmed. She dropped, shrieking without sound. Her nose bled first, then her ears, then her mouth. The last thing she saw was Zevian standing from his seat, arms outstretched. Too late. The crowd hushed. The alphas stilled. Order returned. But in the center of the fire ring, Rowenna lay unmoving. Her hair sprawled in a halo. Her mouth open, blood trickling over her lips. The bloom scent still lingered. Even unconscious, her body still called to them. Seraxis stood. His voice calm. Contain her. The wolf will survive. He turned toward the guards. Prepare the girl, Lisa. Execution protocol begins in 2 nights. Let the audience witness what failure looks like. Zevian stepped down, but didn't kneel. He walked toward the center, toward Rowenna's collapsed form. When he reached her, he didn't touch her, just stared, and said quietly, "You tried to burn it down." He looked up at the ceiling. And maybe you still will. Chapter 20, The Branding. They stripped her in silence. No words. No ritual prayers. Just cold fingers pulling the blood-stiff cloth from her shoulders, the metallic snap of ceremonial chains locking around her wrists, and the hiss of oil poured over skin to purify what had already been desecrated a dozen times over. Rowenna knelt on the obsidian slab of the pre-rite dais, forehead pressed to stone, arms bound behind her back. Her knees were bruised, her cheekbones swollen. The heat bloom had burned out of her system overnight, but its scent still clung to her pores, proof she had once tried to set wolves on fire with nothing but a dance. And failed. Now she was to be marked. No, branded. The difference was not technical. It was spiritual. Marks could be undone. Brands were permanent. Zevian stood at the edge of the dais, fists clenched behind his back, lips tight. His uniform gleamed with council approval, but his eyes were shadows. She hadn't looked at him. She wouldn't. Syraxis approached in full rite robes, obsidian silk, etched with silver fangs and red cuffs soaked in crushed heat root. His bare hands held the brand. It was a flat iron, shaped not like any pack sigil, but like a wolf's open mouth, teeth bared, tongue forked, eyes hollow. The symbol of submission. Of full system compliance. Of erasure. The audience stood, silent. The iron hissed as Syraxis lowered it into the brazier. Rowenna didn't move. Not even when the guards came to lower her robe and expose her right shoulder. Her hair fell over her face like a veil. Only when Syraxis stepped into her space did her voice rise, dry, brittle. "I'd rather you bit me." Syraxis smiled. "This is cleaner." He turned to the crowd. Before alpha selection, before the mating trials, before the blood bonding begins, we brand those who have resisted so that they may enter bonded with humility. This is not a mark of shame. This is a mark of peace. He dipped the iron. Smoke rose. Rowenna's eyes fluttered shut. Zevian took a step forward. "Let me do it." Syraxis didn't turn. "She has disobeyed the system. She will be branded by the one who speaks for it." Zevian's voice dropped. "I said let me. She is no longer yours to shield." The iron came down. Rowenna's scream was silent. Her body didn't jerk, because she wouldn't give them that. But her spine locked so violently she nearly snapped her own shoulders from the socket. The brand seared flesh with a hiss. Her skin blistered. Smoke curled around her face like incense. Still, she said nothing, until Syraxis removed the iron. And then she laughed. It was soft, dry, cracked. Blood ran from her lip where her teeth had pierced it. "They'll remember me," she whispered, eyes unfocused. "They'll say there was a wolf who burned and crawled in the same breath." Zevian closed his eyes. He couldn't look, couldn't breathe, because he could see it now as clearly as the wound steaming on her shoulder. He had become part of the machine that was destroying her. And if he didn't do something, he would be the final blade that finished the job. Syraxis raised the iron one last time to show the crowd. She is ready. She will be claimed in the rite of binding, marked by the highest bidder. Rowenna collapsed. Not from weakness, from decision. She would crawl into that circle. She would let them believe she was broken. But one day, 1 second, 1 claw. She would return it all. With fire. With teeth. Chapter 21, The Chains Made of Names. The walls of the engraving room whispered. Every inch of black stone was carved with letters, thousands of them, etched in silver leaf and buried under the weight of ash. Names. Bloodlines. Lot numbers. Assignments. She-wolves reduced to metadata. Rowenna ran her fingers over one of the stone tablets as the rogue sisters Mira and Rinna sealed the door behind them. Their breath came fast. Sweat trickled down their necks. The torches they carried spat smoke, heavy with cedar and memory. "This is it," Mira whispered. "No alarms?" Rowenna asked. "None. Not for another 3 minutes." 3 minutes. That's all they had. Rowenna stepped into the center of the chamber. Her naked feet pressed against the runes burned into the floor. The stone was warm, not from heat, but from blood. Every she-wolf who had passed through the spire, whether by sale or slaughter, had her name recorded here. Not for mourning. For record-keeping. Rinna unpacked a leather pouch, its contents clinking like teeth. Glass vials. Molten spark powder. A pinch of forbidden wind seed. Once we set the powder into the root channel, the ignition chain will. "Wait," Rowenna said. Her voice had gone distant. She stood frozen before one of the larger slabs, eyes fixed on a single line of script near the base. Dust-coated. Nearly hidden. But still legible. Werewolf Solwynd. Her mother's name. Marked with a line through it. A failure designation. Unclaimed. Rejected. Deceased. Not a she-wolf. A discarded item. Rowenna dropped to her knees. She pressed her fingers to the stone. And started to scrape. "No time for that," Mira warned. But Rowenna didn't stop. She dug her nails into the engraving, trying to erase the strike-through line, blood welling under her fingers. "She's not a failure," she whispered. "She's not." The tears came fast, unexpected. She hadn't cried for Ira in years. Not after the first time. Not after the dream where she saw her mother screaming inside the flames and no one, not one wolf, had moved. She hadn't wept because crying wouldn't bring her justice. But here, before this name, cold and half erased, she broke. She loved. Rowenna choked. She didn't disobey. She chose. That wasn't weakness. It was. A noise behind her. Steel unsheathing. A bootstep on stone. Rinna's scream. And then the crack of blade through flesh. Mira shouted. Rowenna turned just as Rinna collapsed, throat split wide, blood spraying across the stone wall behind her. 2 enforcers burst into the chamber, spears drawn, scent armor gleaming with fresh venom dust. Mira lunged forward, too fast, too bold. One spear caught her in the ribs. She gasped. Dropped. Rowenna didn't run. She screamed. The sound cracked the air like thunder. The wind answered. It burst from her like a blade, cutting the spear in half, slamming one guard into the wall hard enough to break bone. The second moved to grab her. She flung the wind again, ragged and unshaped, but it bought her 2 heartbeats. She turned and ran. Not toward the door. Toward the deeper passage behind the named chambers. Her shoulder slammed into a stone wall as she slipped through the narrow crevice, knees bleeding, her body drenched in the scent of grief. Her hand still clutched her own blood, mixed with the engraving of her mother's name. That was all she had left of her. By the time she surfaced in the under arches, alarms were already rising. The ritual system had logged her unauthorized presence. And her wind strike. She was now a recorded dissident. No longer a display piece. No longer a ceremonial asset. She was punitive class now. A warning. And the branding on her shoulder was no longer just a symbol. It was permission. To hurt her. To sell her to the lowest bidder. To erase her again. Rowenna fell against the wall, panting, blood trickling down her arms. A whisper stirred in her head. One of the rogue girls had said it earlier, like a joke. You can cut the stone, but the names? They'll chain you even after your ash. She looked down at her palm. Bloody. Trembling. And still clutched around a shard of engraved stone. She would not die chained to her mother's failure. She would make them burn for daring to name her at all. Chapter 22, The Breathing Wall. The wall was made of stone. But it breathed. Not like lungs, no, there was no rhythm, no mercy in its rising and falling. It expanded with screams. Contracted with silence. shivered with the scent of blood, and throbbed with pain that didn't belong to it. It was called the Echo Wall. But for Rowenna, it was a mirror. She couldn't see herself. Only Lisa. She was chained on the other side, wrists stretched high, toes just brushing the ground, back arched from the cruel tension. Her tunic had been torn down the middle, exposing her shoulder blades like wings cracked open mid-flight. Each strike of the lash rippled across her skin like fire. Each welt bloomed purple, then red, then white at the edges. And Rowenna felt every one. Not on her back, but in her breath. In the way her spine seized. In the way her wind sense, tied so tightly to emotion, wrenched her internal rhythm out of sync with reality. They weren't whipping Rowenna, but they had made her watch. And worse, they'd made her feel it. Lisa didn't scream. Not at first. But Rowenna did. Not with voice. With body. With nerve. Every crack of leather across Lisa's flesh sent a wave of sharp, invisible pressure through Rowenna's core. It curled into her gut. It surged into her lungs. It snapped along her bones like phantom whips of wind. She convulsed. Bit her own tongue to keep from sobbing. But it wasn't enough. On the fourth strike, she fell to her knees. On the fifth, she vomited bile. On the sixth, she screamed. It wasn't her name. It was Lisa's. Stop, stop. Let me take it. The wall didn't stop. Neither did the whips. Nor Syraxis. He stood at her cell's entrance, framed by the scent of incense and iron, arms folded behind his back. He didn't look at Lisa. He looked only at Rowenna. Her hair stuck to her face in sweat-matted strands. Her body trembled in rhythms too erratic to be false. Her eyes were wide, wild, and wet. "You're beautiful like this," he said softly. She gagged on her own breath. He took a step closer, unhurried. "In pain, you shed the performance," he said. "You're honest. Raw. Radiant. It's the one time you aren't trying to be stronger than you are." Another crack from the wall. Another howl. Another quake in Rowenna's spine. She slammed her fists against the stone. "Let me take it for her." Syraxis tilted his head. "Why?" She didn't answer. Her throat was too raw. "Is it guilt?" he continued. "Shame? You think if you suffer enough, your mother's death will stop echoing." Another strike. Rowenna gasped, one hand reaching for the wall. "Or do you think pain purifies you? Makes you worthy to be something more than just a pretty tool with a little wind up her sleeve?" She turned her head slowly, blood at her lips, and glared at him. "She is worth 10 of you," she hissed. "And if you let her die, I'll make sure the next wind I call tears your lungs from your throat." Syraxis smiled. Not kindly. "You mistake this for a personal matter," he said. "It's not. This isn't about her. Or you. This is about spectacle. Message. Control." He reached into his sleeve and drew a thin strip of crimson ribbon. "The wolves in the lower spires are watching," he said. "And they'll learn. Because you," he gestured toward the wall, toward Rowenna's trembling body, "you will not break for your friend. You will break for all of them." He pressed the ribbon against the bars. "In 2 days, you'll be presented at the grand rite. Marked. Owned. Claimed before 1,000 eyes." Rowenna didn't respond. She was curled on the floor, arms around her stomach, rocking with each phantom strike. But her lips moved. A whisper. So soft he almost didn't hear it. "She's just a girl." Syraxis didn't blink. "And you were just a girl once. Before they burned your mother." He stepped back. "Now you're fire." He left her there. Alone. Still shivering. Still bleeding from someone else's wounds. Night fell without sound. And in the deepest hour, when the guards had rotated and the pain had dulled into a throb, the lock clicked, the door creaked, and a shape stepped into the dark. Zevian. He said nothing at first. Just looked at her. Kneeling. Sweat-drenched. Bared. Battered. He crouched, reaching forward, but didn't touch. She flinched anyway. "I'm not here to mark you," he whispered. She didn't answer. "I came to ask if you still want to burn it down." Rowenna lifted her head. Her eyes were no longer wild. They were dead calm. "I don't want to burn it," she whispered. "I want to make them watch as I survive it." Zevian bowed his head, then passed her a folded slip of parchment and the stolen seal key from Syraxis's private vault. Chapter 23: The Bite That Didn't Land. The bronze cell reeked of blood, heat, and crushed lavender. It wasn't meant to comfort her. Nothing in the threefold spire ever was. Rowenna sat against the wall, legs drawn up, breath shallow. Sweat slicked the curve of her neck, her temples, the backs of her knees. Her tunic stuck to her skin, soaked through from the fever Syraxis had designed into the restraints, one final humiliation before the rite. She hadn't slept. Not truly. Not since Lisa's scream had pierced the wall. Not since the brand had burned itself through her bone. And now, in the deepest part of the night, the lock clicked. She didn't flinch. She expected pain or orders or Syraxis's smirking eyes. She didn't expect him. Zevian stepped inside. His uniform jacket was gone. His boots were wet with dew from the outer towers. His face was drawn, gaunt with something beyond exhaustion. "Don't," she croaked, before he said a word. He shut the door behind him. Slid the bolt. "Don't try to free me. I'm not." He crossed the room slowly. She didn't rise. She couldn't. "You're risking your rank, your life." "I don't care." "You do," she spat. "You care enough to pretend it's about me when it's just about you." He froze. That struck. "You can't bear to see what they'll do to me." "Not because I don't deserve it," she laughed, dry, bitter, "but because it means you let it happen. You, the perfect son of Drelthorn. The golden alpha who never got blood on his cuffs." Zevian stepped closer. She pressed back into the wall like it could swallow her. "I don't need you to fix it," she whispered. "I need you to leave." He crouched in front of her. His scent, damn it, his scent, rolled into her space like warm dusk. Earth and ash and something aching beneath. She clenched her jaw. "You smell like heat," he said. "Go to hell." He touched her face. Just a brush of his knuckles. She turned away, violently, but he didn't pull back. "You think I came to claim you," he said. "But I came to want you. I don't want to be wanted." He nodded slowly. "Then hit me." She stared. He leaned in. His lips were near her throat now. Not touching. Not even breathing. Just near. "If you hate me, make me bleed." She trembled, but didn't move. "Or," he whispered, "if you want me, if even the smallest part of you is burning for me, then stop lying." Rowenna lunged. Not to slap him. To kiss him. Her mouth collided with his, open and furious, teeth clicking, hands grabbing the front of his shirt and yanking. He kissed her back like a wolf starved, like someone who'd been leashed his whole life and just now realized what his throat was for. They fell. He caught her against the stone, mouth still on hers, hands pressing into her back, her ribs, her thighs. She arched into him. Heat burst in her belly, low and wet, blooming with terrifying speed. Her body moved before her mind caught up, wrapping around him, pulling him down, needing friction, needing touch, needing. She pulled back. Hard. Breathing like she'd run miles. Zevian stilled. His mouth was red. So was hers. His hand still cradled the back of her neck. "You're in heat," he said quietly. "No shit," she gasped. "I can stop." "No, you can't." He didn't move. She swallowed. "I'm giving you everything," she said. "I'm giving you my mouth. My hands. My scent. My thighs." She grabbed his wrist and brought it to her heart, where it pounded like thunder. "But I won't give you my neck." His jaw clenched. "I won't give you the right," she hissed. "I won't let you be the name they burn into my collar when they say she was claimed." She was conquered. He said nothing. She shoved him off. They were both panting. Red-eyed. Shaking. "I would rather be watched by 1,000 wolves in heat than kneel for one who says he loves me and then still bites." He rose. Cold again. Silent. The golden alpha mask sliding back into place like armor he never should have taken off. "You'll ask again," he said. She didn't answer. "And when you do, His eyes flicked to her throat, then back to her eyes. "I won't stop." He left. The bolt slid back into place. She curled against the wall. And for the first time since the brand, she cried. Not from pain. From hunger. Chapter 24. The Feast Before the Fire. The hall glowed like the inside of a throat about to swallow her whole. Every brazier burned white. Every wall blood-red banners stitched with moon-silver thread. The threefold spire had never looked more beautiful. Or more like a tomb. Rowenna stood at the top of the central stair, wrapped in ceremonial silks the color of bone. Her hair had been brushed until it shimmered like black glass, and atop her head sat the silver circlet, the god-bride crown. She wasn't allowed to walk. She was carried. Two muscular she-wolves, already branded, lifted her like a sainted relic and brought her down the stairs to the feast floor, where 1,000 alphas waited to watch her pretend she wasn't dying. The god-bride was not allowed to show weakness. She was allowed to glow, to smile, to sing the words they wrote for her. The ones every she-wolf before her had sung before being bitten, claimed, bled, bred. The she-wolf is not born free. By dream she yields. By bond she lives. She was supposed to kneel before the blood font. She was supposed to offer a rose carved of salt. She was supposed to belong. But Rowenna had long since run out of supposed to. She didn't kneel. She walked slowly, barefoot, into the center of the dais. Every eye turned. She looked divine. She looked dead. Ceraxis stood to her left, robed in obsidian and oil, arms wide to receive the words of submission. The chant began to build. The room hummed with alpha breath, rising to meet the sacrament. A servant handed her the scroll. The words were already seared into her skin. She unrolled it with shaking hands. And read. Loud. Clear. The she-wolf is not born free. Every alpha leaned forward. But neither is she born a slave. The room stilled. Ceraxis's smile froze. Rowenna raised her voice. She is born with teeth. And dreams. And fury. Gasps. Stillness. Then. So let the master she was promised. Her eyes locked on Ceraxis. Come forward now and bleed for her first. Before anyone could move, she turned the scroll sharply in her hand and drove the sharpened handle straight into the thigh of the envoy standing nearest. The man screamed. Blood soaked the marble. Panic erupted. Alpha guards surged forward. Wind exploded outward from her chest, knocking two backwards. But she didn't run. She raised her arms high, blood on her hands, voice shaking as she screamed above the chaos. I do not yield. I do not yield. I do not. Ceraxis raised one hand. A signal. The dream net dropped. Invisible. Silent. Crushing. Rowenna collapsed to her knees mid-word, mouth open in a frozen scream, unable to make sound. Her entire body went numb. The circlet clattered off her skull, ringing like a funeral bell. The crowd roared in confusion. But Ceraxis's voice cut through them all. Calm. Measured. Cold. The ritual has been disturbed, he said. But the she-wolf still breathes. He descended the dais. Looked down at her where she shook on all fours. His hand caressed the air near her branded shoulder. She is not broken yet. He turned to the crowd. Tomorrow she shall be. The crowd hushed. Ceraxis lifted the bloodied scroll. By order of the right, he declared, Wind-born she-wolf, auction lot 0, formerly reserved for ceremonial bonding, shall be reassigned. A pause. A smile. She will enter the open bite pit. Horror spread through the rows. That was never done to high-grade mates. That was only for rejects. For punishment stock. For spectacle. Ceraxis continued. She shall be marked. By whoever reaches her first. Zevian rose from his seat in the crowd. Face pale. Eyes burning. But he didn't move. Because one step toward her now would be the last he ever took as a Drelthorn. Rowenna bled onto the floor. Her mouth tasted like metal and ash. The silver circlet sat cracked beside her. She stared at it. Then laughed. A soft, broken thing. Because even if no one else knew it, that was the end of the play. What came next would not be theater. It would be war. Chapter 25, The Cut That Screamed. The dream pool was silver tonight. Still. Sacred. Quiet as a grave. Rowenna stood at the edge, draped in nothing but the ceremonial veil, a sheer cloth too thin to cover, too heavy to fly. Her feet were bare. Her wrists unbound, for once. A kindness. Or a trick. Behind her, two silent rogue sisters waited. Their names didn't matter now. They were the last ones left. The last ones brave or broken enough to die for a moment of defiance. One passed her a braid of her own cut hair. The other, a whisper carved in steam on her shoulder. The third gift came from Rowenna herself. A blade. She had hidden it beneath the folds of her own spine. Forged from the hinge of a stolen ceremonial mask. Sharpened with her teeth. It curved like a crescent moon. Like a question mark. Like a wound waiting to become a warning. Syraxis stood atop the observation tier, hands folded calmly as the crowd assembled. All high-ranking alphas present. The bidding stones gleamed beside each of them. The final rite had been declared. Tonight, Rowenna would enter the mark ring. Naked. Silent. Waiting. And one of them, whoever bought her, reached her, claimed her first, would bite. He would own her. Breed her. Or break her. Or both. Unless she made it impossible. Unless she made herself useless. The moment was calculated to perfection. As the low chimes rang, summoning the audience's attention to the pool, the rogue sisters knelt. And Rowenna stepped forward. Her breath slowed. She could already feel the dream pressure building, the artificial heat crawling beneath her skin like 100 fingers begging her to yield. But she wasn't here to yield. She was here to be ruined. On her own terms. Her hand moved quickly, so quickly even the watchers behind the glass didn't react at first. The blade flashed silver. Then red. Then black. She sliced it straight across the back of her neck, diagonally, deep, through the thin cartilage ridge behind her right ear. Through the gland. The one the system used to stimulate dream submission. The one alpha pheromones clung to like leeches. The one that made marking possible. The gland that made her claimable. She cut it out. With her own damn hand. Blood sprayed. The world screamed. She dropped to her knees, body spasming as the dream system panicked, couldn't register her anymore, couldn't contain the chemical collapse. The dream net imploded. Across the hall, half the alphas jolted backward from the sudden severance of signal. Zevian stood. So did half the spire. Syraxis did not move. He only narrowed his eyes. Rowenna lay in a pool of her own blood. Thick. Dark. Spreading across the ceremonial floor, soaking into the sacred linens, staining the basin red where virginal white had once shimmered. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. Her eyes fluttered open as the world dimmed. Above her, the glass ceiling. Above the glass, the moon. And somewhere beyond that, nothing. No gods. No promises. Just silence. She smiled. And whispered, so soft only the blood could hear. Ira. I didn't end it. But I didn't let them win either. Chaos roared. Healers ran. Syraxis shouted orders. But the branding was done. The buyers were watching. And the prize. The perfect she-wolf. The flame of submission. The god bride. The auction jewel. Had bled herself beyond value. Beyond use. Beyond obedience. The wound gaped, grotesque and final. There would be no bite. No mark. No alpha would dare lay claim to a she-wolf whose dream gland had been sliced open. Not because it killed her, but because it made her equal. Untouchable. Untrainable. Unbreakable. Zevian watched her from the second tier. His fists clenched. His voice stuck in his throat. He had tried to save her. She had saved herself first. Even if it killed her. The last thing Rowenna felt before darkness took her was the warmth of her own blood soaking her thighs. and a single drop landing in the center of the offering bowl, where they had once told her to kneel. Now they'd remember her as the one who bled standing. Chapter 26: The Throat of the Machine. The silence in the underground control chamber wasn't the peaceful kind. It was the kind that came before a detonation. Rowenna walked barefoot over marble inlaid with obsidian sigils, veiled in ivory linen that dragged behind her like a serpent's shed skin. 2 guards bowed and stepped aside, believing she was on her way to the sanctum for pre-marking purification. They didn't look her in the eye. None of them did anymore. She moved like prophecy, and no one dared question prophecy. But the moment the final door closed behind her, her shoulders dropped. Her spine straightened. The veil fell away, and her hands curled into fists. Around her, the dream engine pulsed. This was it, the spire's heart. The throat of the machine. Built with bones of wolves who had dared to disobey. Fed by rituals refined over generations. A system more sacred than any god, more feared than any tyrant. She'd memorized its pulse in her nightmares. Now she would stop it. Mira emerged from behind a column, face streaked with soot, one eye swollen from the last ambush. "You're late," she whispered. Rowenna smiled grimly. No, the blood needed to dry first. Another rogue, small, quick, silent, appeared from the ventilation shaft. She passed Rowenna the carved symbol. A sliver of blackwood, etched with a single word in bloodfire ink. Ire. Rowenna turned it in her fingers, pressed it against the dream furnace valve. Then carved the rest. Freedom. The wood hissed. The runes flared. For one brief second, the chamber held its breath. Then the floor beneath them buckled. The pressure burst through vents, through mirrors, through sacramental chains. The dream gland register, the holiest scroll in the spire, shredded itself in midair. Every mating compatibility index went blank. Every auction rank corrupted. The system tried to scream. It had no mouth. So it cracked the walls. Above, across the tiers, stunned silence broke into panic as flames of blue fire burst from the ritual basin, lighting the towers like beacons of blasphemy. Rowenna stepped forward, wind gathering in her fists. A trembling counselor, fat, velvet-robed, once so proud to price her, crawled toward the door. She caught him with a flick of her wrist. Wind slammed the steel shut. "No," she said softly. He whimpered. "Please." She walked toward him slowly. "Do you remember," she said, "how you laughed when they burned my mother?" I. "Do you remember how much I was worth the first time they tried to sell me?" He shook his head, sobbing. She knelt. "You don't?" she asked sweetly, then tightened the wind around his throat. "Tell me, how many silver coins for a girl born of love, not mating?" He choked. She didn't let go. Not until his last gurgle left him twitching. Behind her, Mira whispered, "They'll come. We don't have long." Rowenna wiped her blood-slick hands on the counselor's robes. "Then let's make sure they find nothing left." Above ground, Zevian stood at the foot of the altar with 6 other alphas who had dared whisper dissent over the last season. Together, they lifted the ceremonial black veil, meant to mark the start of the grand rite, and set it aflame. A collective gasp. A rush of shock. And then his voice, clear, strong, shaking only a little. "We refuse." Murmurs. Hearts skipping. He stepped forward, arms out. "Every alpha who claims to rule with honor, look at what this rite has become." He pointed to the burning tower behind him, the smoke spiraling into the clouds. "Look at what she's done. With nothing." The crowd shivered. He met Syraxis's eyes across the arena. And shouted, "I call for the dissolution of the marking protocol. I call for the end of auction law." Inside the machine's dying core, Rowenna watched as the dream fire spread. Mira threw the last of the sacred ledgers into the flame. The rogue sisters began chanting, not the ritual chant, but something older. Something raw. And outside, past the breach in the spire wall, she heard it. The people were chanting back. "Windborn. Windborn. Let the system burn." Rowenna leaned her forehead against the cracked obsidian. "This isn't revolution," she whispered. "It's revenge." Chapter 27: The Stage Before Collapse. They dressed her in victory. Not silk, not blood, but woven light. The ceremonial robes shimmered down her frame like smoke-given form, stitched from pale ash fiber and threaded with storm-glass filaments that pulsed with a soft, haunting glow. Her arms were bare, her back unscarred. Even the old burns from the branding had been painted over with liquid pearl. It was the lie of freedom, and Rowenna wore it better than truth. Outside, the arena of the threefold spire swelled with bodies, alphas from every dominion, elders, tribunal heads, foreign bidders, their ranks organized by scent and coin. 1,000 voices whispered, one above the rest. The Windborn. She walked barefoot, because gods did not need shoes. Zevian stood already on the dais. Not behind a podium, not behind Syraxis, not flanked by guards, but beside her. Plain black clothes. No sigils. No sash of his lineage. He had burned that 2 nights ago. The same night he had whispered, after their mouths had torn at each other, after their bodies had pulled apart but neither quite let go. "I am not your savior." And she had said, sharp as her mother's blade, "Good. I'll never follow a savior. But I'll let you take the final blow for me." Now, they stood on the platform together. Equal. Uneven. Bound, if not marked. And when the crowd silenced to a hush that could split mountains, Rowenna took her place at the center of the ritual seal. The circle carved for submission. The stage built for surrender. She did not kneel. She did not shake. She spoke. "Threefold spire," she said, voice echoing through the amphitheater without aid of spell or system. "For generations, you have placed teeth to the throats of your daughters. You called it law. You called it legacy." She looked down at her bare feet. Then up, far, far up, where a single beam of moonlight slashed the arena from above, like a blade. "I call it theft." A murmur rippled. Some angered. Some stunned. Some aching for someone else to speak first. So Zevian did. "I stand," he said, "not as Drelthorn. Not as heir. But as alpha born of choice. And I cast my voice in favor of the repeal." He stepped forward. "Let it be recorded," he said. "Let it be heard by the stones themselves. The right is ended." Rowenna turned her face to the crowd. Her eyes burned, but not from grief. From something brighter. "This is not my victory," she said softly. She looked past the rows of alphas. Past the banners. Past even Syraxis, frozen where he stood like a shadow turning to salt. She looked to the statue behind the arena, barely visible through the veil of rising smoke. The one they'd built to honor the fallen rogue. The one whose name had been burned off years ago. But Rowenna still knew it. And so she whispered, "It's hers." A hush. Then cheers. The crowd began to move, rising to its feet. Some weeping. Some howling. Some lifting their bidding stones and smashing them to the ground. The system trembled. Syraxis screamed something incoherent. He pushed forward, rage in his limbs, but his guards hesitated. The people surged. Hands caught at his robes. Pulled. Dragged. He vanished in a sea of fury. The copper bell that signaled declaration of right was uncovered. A hand reached for it. Zevian's. His fingers brushed the metal. One sound, and it would be done. And then, chaos. From the far left edge of the dais, behind a curtain of incense, a sudden crash. A low-ranking alpha, one who hadn't even been invited to the inner circle, stumbled through, blood on his forehead, eyes glazed with dream dust. He tripped over a shattered urn, fell forward, hands out, and his teeth scraped her neck. Not hard, not aimed, not intentional. Just enough. Just enough. Rowenna gasped. She stumbled. Zevian caught her, but it was too late. The crowd saw. The scent changed. The air shifted. Every alpha within 50 paces felt it. The snap. The imprint. The irreversible echo of a mark. Not chosen. Not earned. Not deserved. But done. Rowenna's knees hit the platform. She didn't cry out. Didn't collapse. But her hands trembled on the stone. A silence unlike any other fell. The bell never rang. The crowd stared. Zevian stood frozen, horror carved into his face, his mouth slightly open as if some prayer had been aborted at the edge of sound. And Rowenna. She reached up, touched her neck, felt the heat still lingering, then lowered her hand, and looked at the blood on her fingertips. Not her blood. His. They had pulled him back already. The one who'd fallen. The one who'd marked her. The one who wasn't even meant to be here. He was taken away. And yet, his mark stayed. She wasn't claimed. Not truly. Not wholly. But enough. Enough that the system, if it had not collapsed completely, could still say, she is owned. She looked at the crowd. At the dreamers. At the rebels. At the still burning sky. And whispered. So close. Chapter 28, The Wrong Teeth. The world didn't end with a scream. It ended with a drip. A single line of blood slid down the curve of Rowenna's throat, warm and slow, as if reluctant to acknowledge what had just happened. Her hand reached for the mark. Her fingers didn't tremble. Not yet. Not quite. They landed on skin that pulsed, faint, foreign, claimed. Not by fate. Not by fire. By Garrick. A name she didn't even know until she heard it spoken. A voice young, cracked with panic, broke through the stunned silence that had descended over the spire. I didn't mean. He stumbled forward, face pale, hands lifted in surrender. His teeth were red. Not from a bite, not even a full puncture, just enough to breach the gland. Just enough to burn everything. Zevian's blade was out before anyone spoke again. But Garrick saw it. And knelt. I tripped, the boy whispered. I swear it wasn't, I didn't. Rowenna looked at him. Looked through him. Not with rage. Not with vengeance. But with something worse. Recognition. This was the kind of mistake they never accounted for. Not the tragedy of sacrifice. Not the nobility of rebellion. But accident. Something clumsy. Something pointless. Something that shouldn't have mattered, but did. Zevian didn't shout. He didn't make speeches. He just moved. One clean stroke. Garrick's throat opened. His body hit the floor beside the very spot he had defiled. The blood mingled with hers. But only one scent lingered. Rowenna. Marked. At first, no one spoke. Then, she's not the warbringer anymore. A whisper. She's just a bitten female. Another. Her mate's dead. All that's left is the imprint. A third. Then silence again. But this time it didn't crack. It collapsed. Because in the center of the most sacred stage of the most sacred law, their unbreakable martyr now bled the scent of a claimed she-wolf. The arena began to shift, physically, socially, symbolically. The bid system, frozen moments earlier by Zevian's repeal motion, lit up again. System error. Invalid free status detected. Override initialized. Auction reassessment protocol 1A7. Postmark contingency. Status. Conditionally claimable. The machine didn't care about her rebellion. It read her status. Her skin. Her gland. And Rowenna, still half standing, half staggering, watched as the panel flickered from Windborn Unbound to Marked Voided. Then, Available, conditionally marked. Her knees finally gave way. Zevian caught her before she hit the stone. Don't, she whispered. But he already had her. Already felt the heat of her skin beneath his palm. He looked at the screen. At the crowd. At Syraxis, somewhere in the shadows, not triumphant, but smirking. Because the system had outlived the rebellion. Because even after all the fires, all the speeches, all the wounds, one slip of a Fong was enough to undo a revolution. I can still fight this, Zevian said. His voice was hoarse. Desperate. I'll appeal the mark. I'll override it. I'll. Rowenna's head rolled weakly on his shoulder. Her mouth opened, dry. She wanted to laugh. But all that came was a sob. "It's not the mark, Zevian." Her eyes found his, glassy and hollow. "It's the story." He didn't understand. So she whispered the part that mattered. "They'll never call me their savior again. Just the she-wolf who got bitten and couldn't finish what she started." He closed his eyes, held her tighter. But the bell above the spire rang. Once. Twice. Not for the end of the system, but for the resumption of auction status. Syraxis stepped back into view, robes torn, but his voice smooth as oil. "It is the law," he said simply, "that only an unclaimed she-wolf may end the rite." He gestured. "And she is no longer unclaimed." The final bid panel relit. The bidding stones began to glow. The machine, unfeeling, unforgiving, unchanging, restarted. And Rowenna, blood on her collarbone, ash beneath her nails, freedom on her lips, lay in the arms of the only man she ever almost let herself love. And said nothing. Because what was there left to say? They hadn't dragged her from her throne. They hadn't broken her in battle. They hadn't even silenced her with force. They had let her win. And then spoiled the ending. With the wrong teeth. Chapter 29. The Fire After the Funeral. The wind in Wolfgrave didn't howl. It whispered. Like a voice that had run out of breath a long time ago but still refused to fall silent. Snow fell without weight, blanketing the charred bones of the purification outpost. The spire's reach had never extended this far. Too far north, too little control, too many ghosts. Only the forgotten came here. And Rowenna had made herself one of them. She sat on the edge of a crumbling ledge where the cliffs dropped into an expanse of endless frost. Her robe was tattered. Her boots were soaked. Her shoulder still ached where the branding had once sizzled her flesh, but the skin had faded to a dull pink now. Like everything else. The blood had dried. The teeth had healed. But the mark remained. Not on her neck, but in the eyes of the world. Behind her, snow cracked softly under deliberate footsteps. She didn't look. Didn't have to. "I brought wine," Zevian said quietly. She didn't move. He sighed, set the bottle on the flat stone beside her, and sat. They both stared into the horizon, where the last visible beam of sun stretched its fingers along the edge of the world and disappeared without apology. "I didn't know where else you'd go," he said. "I didn't go," Rowenna murmured. "I was thrown." They sat in silence for a long while. Zevian took a slow breath. "They're still talking about you, you know." "I know. They call you the Silent Flame. The one who burned everything and then vanished." She turned her head. "Did it burn?" He hesitated. She smiled, bitter and distant. "Exactly." Zevian reached for the wine. Uncorked it. Poured nothing. "I can give you another name," he said. "I can have your record rewritten. You could live in the southern dominions under a false crest. I can even offer you a council seat. Drelthorn has enough allies to make it happen." She looked at him. "No." His lips pressed together. "Rowenna." She stood. The wind wrapped around her ankles, lifting her hair like a crown of embers not yet extinguished. "Do you know what they see now?" she said, voice sharp but quiet. "When they look at me?" She didn't wait for an answer. "They see the mark. Not even who gave it. Just the proof that someone did. They see a body with a claim that didn't stick. A collar without a chain." He stood too, closer now, watching her as if he was afraid she might disappear again. "You're not just that," he said. "You're the one who almost ended it. You're the one who will, if you just—" She stepped toward him. Inches apart now. Snow melting on her cheeks, not from heat, but from something that had never gotten the chance to freeze. "And you," she said, "you look at me, and all you see is the woman someone else bit." He flinched. Her voice softened, but it didn't lose its edge. "This is how the system survives, Zevian. It doesn't need to kill me. It just needs to make sure no one else sees me the same way." She stepped past him. He reached out, just gently, fingertips brushing her arm. "Don't walk away from me." She stopped. Laughed once. "No joy. You keep saying that." Then looked back. "And I keep telling you, I never walked away. I was left behind." She turned again. walked to the cliff's edge. He followed. "I still love you," he said, helplessly. The wind caught her words as she answered. "So do I." She paused. "But love isn't freedom." She crouched, scooping snow into her palms, pressing it to the faint scar on her neck. "They don't call me Warbringer anymore," she whispered. "They don't call me anything. I'm just the she-wolf who almost burned the system. But not before it left its teeth in me." Her voice cracked. "I didn't die. But no one thinks I'm alive." Zevian came beside her again. But he didn't touch her this time. "I can't change what happened," he said. "I know. I can still fight." She nodded. "So fight." He hesitated. "Without you." Her lips trembled. But she didn't cry. "Freedom," she whispered, "is not love. It's not being bought." She stood. The wind screamed once, then stilled. From the distant cliffs, the sound of a bell echoed, old, broken, rusted. The remains of a clock tower now overgrown with frost. The last bell of the spire. And Rowenna closed her eyes. The world had buried her. But she still heard her mother's voice. "They don't need to kill you, love. They just need to make sure you never stand again." Rowenna opened her eyes. And stood taller. Chapter 30. The Wolf Who Doesn't Howl. They stopped saying her name. Not from fear. Not from hate. But because names belong to the living. And she no longer was. Not quite. Not in the way the world measures breath and bone and fire. She walked through the pine-crushed forests of the north, where snow muffled every sound and the air bit harder than any fong. She crossed rivers that had forgotten how to flow, stepped across plains so wide even the wind got lost. Her boots left no print. Her scent washed clean. Her voice was gone. She had stopped speaking weeks ago. Maybe longer. Words were for those still believed. She had won. The auction rituals were suspended. The threefold spire now a hollow ruin of broken laws and half-burned banners. The Drelthorn name no longer carried the same weight in court. Syraxis was gone. Not dead, just vanished. Some said he'd buried himself beneath the remains of the spire. Others said he'd carved out his tongue and offered it to the altar of law he once worshipped. No one knew. But they knew her. Rowenna Solwynd. Except, she didn't answer to that anymore. She answered to nothing. Yet still, every newborn she-wolf in every edge pack, every fringe tribe, every lowland den heard the same phrase whispered over shared firelight and stolen breaths. The windborn doesn't get bitten twice. And somehow, that was enough. One night, as she passed through the red grass valleys of the west, a girl no older than 10 stood in her path. Wide eyes, bare feet, no color. She didn't move. Rowenna stopped. The child said nothing, just pointed. Over the hilltop. A flag burned there, blue, gold, teeth inlaid. Another small pack trying to revive the auctions, hidden in the cracks of the system's fall. Rowenna looked at the smoke. Then at the girl. And for the first time in months, she gave the barest nod. Not of promise. Not of comfort. But of recognition. The girl smiled. Not wide. Not grateful. Just a small curl at the edge of her mouth, like she'd seen a story come true. Rowenna passed her. The flag stopped burning. There were no more battles. Not for her. She no longer led, no longer stood atop stages, no longer stared down crowds. But sometimes, when a rogue she-wolf knelt to the wrong scent and caught herself in time, or when a group of girls broke free from transport chains and disappeared into the pines, or when a Drelthorn cousin dared call the auctions history and was found exiled the next day, someone would whisper, "She must have passed through." And that was enough. She slept under the trees now. A different grove each time. Never too close to towns. Never too far from roads. She was never seen. But always seen. She never spoke. But always heard. And when the cold bit deepest, and she curled her knees beneath her chin and let the wind whisper past her collar, she would feel it. Her mother's voice. Not words. Just the feeling. Freedom isn't love. It's not being bought. She'd close her eyes, then open them again. Because even if she could no longer howl, they still listened. And somewhere, beyond the fog-drenched ridges and frost-split peaks, a bell would ring. Soft, low, unmistakable. And someone, always someone, would pause in the dark and whisper, "She's still watching." Even wolves who don't howl leave echoes. Even wolves who don't breathe still leave paths. And even if the system branded her silent, the world remembered. The Windborn didn't howl, but the forest never forgot her name.